When Michael Jordan stood at the free throw line during a packed Bulls game in 1996, something strange caught his eye. Among 20,000 screaming fans, one man stood completely still. No cheering, no jumping, just watching Michael with an intensity that made his skin crawl. The man wore a gray jacket, his eyes never left Michael's face. And somehow Michael felt like he'd seen him before. But that was impossible. Michael didn't know this man. He'd never met him. So why did his face seem so familiar? Then it happened again. Different game, different section, same gray jacket, same unwavering stare. The man was following him. Michael asked security to investigate. They found nothing suspicious, but the sightings continued, game after game, week after week, always watching, always silent, never coming closer. Michael began to have nightmares. In his dreams, he was 10 years old again, playing basketball on a cracked court in North Carolina. And behind the chain-link fence stood a man in a gray jacket, watching him with those same intense eyes. That's when Michael realized the terrifying truth. This wasn't a new stalker. This man had been watching him since childhood. For over 20 years, he'd been there, hidden in crowds, documenting Michael's every move. But why? What did he want? And how was his appearance connected to the murder of Michael's father 3 years earlier? When Michael finally confronted the stranger face to face, the man said 5 words that changed everything. "I made a promise to someone you loved more than basketball itself." Who was this mysterious guardian? What promise had been made? And what secret message had Michael's father left behind that could only be revealed after Michael won his 4th championship? The answer would lead Michael on a journey into his own past, uncover the shocking truth about his father's death, and reveal a conspiracy that had been hidden for decades. Watch the whole video to discover the incredible true story of the man in the gray jacket, the letter that waited 3 years to be opened, and the promise that connected a father, a son, and a stranger across 25 years. This is a story about loyalty, love, and the real meaning of greatness that goes far beyond any basketball court. Michael Jordan bounced the basketball 3 times. The crowd at the United Center was so loud he could barely hear the ball hit the floor. 20,000 people were screaming his name. It was Game 42 of the 1996 season, and the Chicago Bulls were winning by 12 points. But Michael wasn't thinking about the score. He stood at the free throw line, the ball resting in his hands. His eyes swept across the sea of faces. Red jerseys everywhere, signs that said Jordan is God and 23 forever, flashbulbs popping like tiny stars. This was normal. This was every game. Then he saw him. Section 214. Row 8, Seat 12. A man in a gray jacket stood completely still. Everyone around him was jumping, cheering, waving their arms, but this man just stood there. His hands were at his sides, his face was calm, and his eyes were locked on Michael with an intensity that made Michael's skin prickle. Michael blinked hard. He tried to focus on the rim. He bent his knees, brought the ball up, and released it with the perfect form his father had taught him years ago. Swish, the crowd exploded with noise. His teammates slapped him on the back as they ran down the court. But Michael's eyes drifted back to section 214. The man was still there, still staring, still not moving. "MJ, you good?" Scottie Pippen jogged beside him, breathing hard. "Yeah," Michael said, but his voice sounded far away, even to himself. The game continued. Michael scored 18 more points. He grabbed 7 rebounds. He made 2 steals that brought the crowd to their feet. The Bulls won 108-94. It should have been a perfect night. But every time Michael looked up, the man in the gray jacket was there. Different angles, different moments, but always watching with that same unwavering stare. After the game, Michael sat in the locker room, his jersey soaked with sweat. The other players were laughing, music was blasting from someone's radio, and reporters were waiting outside to ask their usual questions. But Michael's mind was elsewhere. "You see that guy tonight?" Michael asked Scottie, who was pulling off his shoes. "What guy?" Scottie said, not looking up. "Section 214, gray jacket, just standing there the whole game." Scottie laughed. "Man, there's 20,000 people in this building. You're telling me you noticed one dude?" "He wasn't cheering," Michael said quietly. "Everybody else is going crazy and this guy is just watching, like he's studying me." Scottie threw a towel at him. "You've got the whole city studying you, Mike. That's what happens when you're the best. You're probably just tired. We've played 6 games in 9 days." Michael nodded, but he didn't believe that. He'd played basketball his entire life. He knew what it felt like to be watched by fans, by scouts, by coaches. This was different. This felt personal. Michael drove home that night in his black Mercedes. The Chicago streets were quiet. Streetlights cast orange shadows on the empty sidewalks. He lived in a big house in Highland Park, but tonight the drive felt longer than usual. He kept thinking about the man's face. There was something familiar about it. Something that tugged at the edges of his memory like a song he couldn't quite remember. Where had he seen that face before? His hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. He tried to picture it clearly. The man was maybe 50 years old with dark hair going gray at the temples. He had deep-set eyes and a thin mouth. His gray jacket looked old, like he'd been wearing it for years. But it wasn't just the clothes or the face. It was the way he looked at Michael, not with excitement or admiration. Not with the hungry stare of someone wanting something from him. It was more like recognition, like he knew Michael from somewhere, from some other time. Michael pulled into his driveway and sat in the car for a moment, engine still running. His wife Juanita had left the porch light on for him. Through the window, he could see the warm glow of their living room. He shook his head. "You're losing it, Jordan," he muttered to himself. "One weird fan and you're acting like it's a conspiracy." But as he walked to his front door, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about one weird fan. This was about something bigger, something that had been waiting for him. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Juanita's soft breathing beside him. The red numbers on the alarm clock glowed, 2:47 a.m. He closed his eyes and tried to clear his mind. Count backwards from 100. Think about tomorrow's practice. Plan his breakfast. Anything to stop thinking about the man in section 214. But when sleep finally came, the dreams arrived with it. He was young again, maybe 10 years old. He was standing on a cracked basketball court in Wilmington, North Carolina. The humid summer air wrapped around him like a wet blanket, the sound of the ball echoing off concrete, the smell of cut grass and motor oil from the nearby garage. His father was there, standing on the sideline, arms crossed, watching Michael shoot free throws. "Keep your elbow in," his father said. "Follow through, wrist straight." Michael made 10 shots in a row. His father smiled, that proud smile that made Michael's chest feel warm and full. But then in the dream, Michael turned around. Behind the chain-link fence, standing in the shadow of an old oak tree, was a man in a gray jacket, the same man from the game. He was younger in the dream, maybe 30 years old, but his face was exactly the same. The same intense eyes, the same stillness, watching, always watching. Michael tried to call out to him, but no sound came from his mouth. He tried to run toward the fence, but his legs wouldn't move. The man just stood there, and the look on his face was so sad, so full of something Michael couldn't name, that it made his heart ache. Then the man lifted his hand and pointed at Michael, not threatening, just pointing, like he was trying to say, "I see you, I know you." Michael woke up gasping for air. His t-shirt was damp with sweat. Juanita stirred beside him but didn't wake. The clock now read 4:23 a.m. Sat up, running his hands over his face. It was just a dream. Just his mind playing tricks on him because he was tired and stressed about the playoffs coming up. But deep down, in a place he didn't want to examine too closely, Michael knew the truth. That dream wasn't random. That man wasn't random. Somehow, someway, that man in the gray jacket had been watching him for a very, very long time, and Michael needed to figure out why. The next morning, Michael went through his usual routine. He got up at 5:30, went for a 6-mile run, came home to a breakfast of egg whites and oatmeal, and drove to the Birdo Center for practice. Everything was normal, everything was routine, but he couldn't stop thinking about the dream, about that basketball court in Wilmington, about the man standing behind the fence. During practice, his shots were off. He missed 3 layups in a row, something that almost never happened. Coach Phil Jackson pulled him aside. "Your head's somewhere else today," Phil said quietly. He was a tall man with graying hair and eyes that seemed to see everything. "Want to talk about it?" Michael shook his head. "Just tired, I'm good." Phil studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, but remember, Michael, basketball is played with the body, but it's won with the mind. Whatever's distracting you, deal with it. Don't let it live rent-free in your head." Michael appreciated the advice, but how could he deal with something he didn't understand? How could he explain that a stranger in the crowd had somehow crawled inside his thoughts and wouldn't leave? After practice, Michael sat in his car in the parking lot. He pulled out his cell phone, the big, bulky kind that people in 1996 carried, and stared at it. He had an idea forming, a crazy idea. But maybe crazy was what he needed right now. He dialed his mother's number in North Carolina. "Michael," his mother Dolores answered on the third ring, her voice warm and surprised. "Baby, it's the middle of the day. Shouldn't you be at practice?" "Just finished, Mama," Michael said. "I wanted to ask you something." "What's wrong? You sound strange." Michael hesitated. How could he explain this without sounding paranoid? "Do you remember, when I was a kid playing ball at Empire Park, were there ever any people who used to watch the games? Like regulars who weren't parents or coaches?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Well, sure, honey, there were always folks around. Why do you ask?" "I'm trying to remember someone," Michael said slowly. "A man maybe in his 30s back then, wore a gray jacket a lot, quiet guy, just watched from a distance." The silence that followed was longer this time. When his mother spoke again, her voice had changed. It was softer, more careful. "Michael, why are you asking about this?" "So you do remember someone," Michael said, sitting up straighter. "Who was he, Mama?" I'm not sure," she said, but Michael could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "There was a man who used to come around sometimes. Your father mentioned him once or twice, said he was harmless, just liked watching the kids play. But honey, that was almost 20 years ago. Why does this matter now?" Michael's heart was beating faster. What was his name? Did anyone know his name? "I think," his mother paused, thinking. "I think someone called him Thomas once, Thomas something. But Michael, really, what is this about?" Michael closed his eyes. Thomas. The name echoed in his mind like a key turning in a lock. "It's probably nothing, Mama," he said finally. "Just a weird memory that popped up. I love you. Tell Daddy I said hi." "You're worrying me, baby." "Don't worry, I'm fine, really." He hung up before she could ask more questions. His hands were shaking slightly as he set the phone down on the passenger seat. Thomas. A man who watched him play as a kid. A man who his father said was harmless. But if he was so harmless, why did he disappear almost 20 years ago? And why was he back now, standing in the United Center, watching Michael with those same intense, knowing eyes? Michael started his car and pulled out of the parking lot. He had a game tonight against the New York Knicks. He needed to focus, needed to be sharp. But as he drove toward home, he couldn't help glancing in his rearview mirror, half expecting to see a gray jacket in the car behind him. The shadow in the stands had become the shadow in his mind. And Michael Jordan, the man who feared nothing on the basketball court, felt the first cold touch of something he hadn't felt in years: fear of the unknown. Michael made 18 points in the first half against the Knicks. The game was close, physical, the way games against New York always were. Patrick Ewing was battling him under the basket. John Starks was talking trash every time they passed each other. This was playoff basketball, even though it was still the regular season, but Michael's mind kept drifting. During timeouts, his eyes scanned the crowd, section by section, row by row, looking for a gray jacket, looking for that face. He didn't see him in the first quarter, or the second. Maybe the man wasn't here tonight. Maybe it really had been nothing, just one strange moment that Michael had blown out of proportion because he was tired. Then, with 2 minutes left in the third quarter, Michael drove to the basket. Ewing fouled him hard and Michael went to the free throw line. As he positioned himself, as the referee handed him the ball, his eyes did what they always did, swept across the crowd. Section 107, row 15, seat 9. There he was, the gray jacket, the same face. The same absolutely still posture while everyone around him screamed and waved their arms. He wasn't looking at the scoreboard or talking to the fans next to him. He was looking directly at Michael with those dark, deep-set eyes. Michael's first free throw hit the front of the rim and bounced away. He never missed free throws. Never. Scotty looked at him with concern. "You good, Mike?" Michael nodded but said nothing. He took the second shot. It went in, but barely. The crowd cheered, but Michael barely heard them. The man in the gray jacket didn't react, didn't clap, didn't smile. He just watched. The Bulls won 97-92. Michael finished with 31 points, but his shooting percentage was lower than usual. In the locker room, reporters asked him about the win, about Ewing's defense, about the upcoming playoffs. Michael answered their questions on autopilot. His real attention was on the security guard standing near the door, a big man named Curtis who had worked at the United Center for 3 years. After the reporters left, Michael caught Curtis's eye and motioned him over. "Curtis, I need a favor," Michael said quietly. and I need you to keep it between us." Curtis nodded. "Whatever you need, MJ." There's a man who's been at the last 2 home games. Gray jacket, dark hair going gray. Maybe 50 years old. He sits in different sections. Tonight he was in 107. I want to know if he's here at the next game, and if he is, I want to know where he sits. Curtis frowned. "Is this guy bothering you? You want me to have security talk to him?" "No," Michael said quickly. "Nothing like that. I need to know if he keeps showing up. Can you do that without making it obvious?" "Sure thing," Curtis said. "I'll keep an eye out." Michael felt a small sense of relief. At least he was doing something. At least he wasn't just sitting around wondering. 3 days later, the Bulls played the Indiana Pacers at home. Michael arrived at the arena early, went through his pregame routine, and tried not to think about whether the man would be there. But of course he was thinking about it, every minute, every second. The game started at 7:30. By 7:45, Curtis appeared near the Bulls bench during a timeout. He caught Michael's eye and gave a small nod, then held up 3 fingers, then a 1, then made a circling motion. Section 310. Michael's heart sank and soared at the same time. Sank because this confirmed he wasn't imagining things. Soared because now he knew for sure this was real. This was a pattern. The man in the gray jacket had come to a 3rd game. Michael played harder that night than he had all season. 38 points, 12 rebounds, 7 assists. The Bulls destroyed the Pacers by 23 points. But the whole time Michael was aware of Section 310 high above him in the upper deck. He was being watched, studied, observed. But why, that weekend, there was no game? Michael had 2 days at home with his family. His kids, Jeffrey, Marcus, and Jasmine, were playing in the backyard. His wife, Juanita, was reading a book on the patio. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon in early March, the kind of day that should have been perfect. But Michael couldn't relax. He sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee growing cold in front of him. His mind kept replaying the 3 sightings, the way the man stood, the way he looked at Michael, not with excitement or desire for an autograph, but with something else. Something that felt like sadness, recognition, purpose. "Michael, you've been staring at that coffee for 20 minutes. He looked up. Juanita stood in the doorway, arms crossed, one eyebrow raised. She was wearing jeans and one of his old North Carolina t-shirts. Even after years of marriage, she was still the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen. "Sorry," he said, "just thinking about the playoffs." "Don't lie to me," she said, sitting down across from him. "You've been distracted for 2 weeks. You barely ate dinner last night. You woke up at 3 in the morning and I found you in the living room staring at old photo albums. What's going on?" Michael wanted to tell her. He wanted to explain about the man in the gray jacket, about the dream, about the strange feeling that something from his past was reaching out to him. But how could he explain it without sounding paranoid or crazy? "There's a guy who's been coming to the games," he said finally. "Same guy, 3 games in a row. He just watches me. Doesn't cheer, doesn't react. Just stands there staring." Juanita's expression shifted from concern to understanding. "Michael, you have thousands of fans. Some of them are intense. It's part of being who you are." "This is different," Michael insisted. "I think I knew him when I was a kid, or he knew me. I can't explain it, but something about him feels connected to my past." Juanita reached across the table and took his hand. Her fingers were warm and steady. "Then find out who he is. Have security talk to him, or talk to him yourself if you need to. But don't let this eat at you. I know you, Michael Jordan. When something's bothering you, you don't rest until you figure it out. So figure it out." He squeezed her hand. "What if I don't like what I find out?" "Then at least you'll know," she said simply. "Not knowing is worse than anything." Monday night brought a charity event at a downtown Chicago hotel. Michael was the guest of honor at a fundraiser for inner-city youth basketball programs. He wore a dark suit, signed autographs, and gave a short speech about the importance of giving kids opportunities to play. The ballroom was packed with Chicago's wealthy and influential business leaders, politicians, other athletes. Everyone wanted to shake Michael's hand, take a picture with him, tell him how much they loved watching him play. Michael smiled and nodded and said thank you about 500 times. Then, across the crowded room, he saw the gray jacket. The man was standing near the back wall beside a table full of silent auction items. He wasn't eating or drinking. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was just there, watching Michael from maybe 50 feet away. Michael's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't a Bulls game. This was a private charity event. You needed a ticket to get in. Tickets cost $500 each. Who was this man? And how much effort was he putting into following Michael? Michael excused himself from a conversation with a hospital administrator and started making his way across the room. His heart was pounding. His hands felt cold. This was it. He was going to confront this mystery head-on. But the crowd was thick with people who wanted to stop him, talk to him, grab his attention. By the time Michael pushed through to the back wall, the man in the gray jacket was gone. Michael stood there, breathing hard, scanning the ballroom. He saw the exit door slowly closing as if someone had just left through it. He rushed to the door and pushed it open. It led to a hallway that connected to the hotel lobby. Michael looked both ways. A few hotel guests walked past. A bellhop pushed a cart of luggage. But no gray jacket, no familiar face. Mr. Jordan, a security guard, approached him. Everything okay? Did you see a man come through here? Gray jacket, maybe 50 years old. The guard shook his head. Sorry, sir, I just got to this post a minute ago. Is there a problem? Michael wanted to scream. Instead, he just shook his head. No problem, thanks. He walked back to the ballroom, but his mind was racing. This was deliberate. The man was making sure Michael saw him, but he didn't want to be caught. He didn't want to talk. He just wanted Michael to know he was there. But why? What was the point of all this? The next day, Michael called Curtis at the United Center. Curtis, I need more than just his location at the games, Michael said. I need to know how he's getting tickets. I need to know if he's using the same name each time. Can you access that information? I can try, Curtis said. But MJ, maybe you should let actual security handle this. If this guy is stalking you. He's not stalking me, Michael interrupted. At least not in a dangerous way. I just need to understand what's happening. Curtis was quiet for a moment. All right, give me a few days. I'll see what I can dig up. Thank you. Michael hung up and sat in his home office, surrounded by trophies and framed photos from his career. Championship rings in a glass case, his Olympic gold medal, pictures of him soaring through the air, tongue out, defying gravity. This was his life. Basketball, success, fame. Everything he'd worked for since he was a kid, shooting on that cracked court in Wilmington. So why did it suddenly feel like his past was chasing him? That night, Michael couldn't sleep again. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around him. Juanita was asleep beside him, one arm thrown over his chest. Usually her presence calmed him, but tonight nothing helped. He kept thinking about what his mother had said. Thomas something. Your father said he was harmless. His father, James Jordan, the man who had taught Michael everything that mattered. How to shoot, how to compete, how to be a man. His father had been murdered 3 years ago, shot during a robbery while sleeping in his car on the side of a North Carolina highway. The grief still felt fresh sometimes, a wound that had scabbed over but never fully healed. What would his father say about this situation? Would he tell Michael to forget about it? Or would he tell him to trust his instincts, the way he always had? Michael closed his eyes and tried to remember his father's voice, the way he'd say Michael's name, the way he'd laugh when Michael made a good play, the way he'd put his hand on Michael's shoulder and say, "That's my boy." The memory brought tears to Michael's eyes, but also something else, a kind of clarity. His father had known this man, this Thomas, had said he was harmless, but his father was gone now, unable to explain who Thomas really was or why he'd been watching a 10-year-old Michael play basketball in North Carolina. Maybe Thomas had answers about more than just himself. Maybe he had answers about Michael's father too. Friday brought another home game, the Bulls versus the Charlotte Hornets. Michael scored 42 points. The crowd went insane. The Bulls won easily, and Curtis delivered his report. After the game, in a quiet corner of the locker room, Curtis handed Michael a piece of paper with notes scribbled on it. "Okay, here's what I found," Curtis said in a low voice. "The guy's name is Thomas Whitmore. At least that's the name on the ticket purchases. He's bought tickets to 5 Bulls games this season, the 3 you noticed plus 2 earlier in the year, different sections each time. All tickets purchased with cash at the box office, which is unusual. Most people use credit cards or buy online." Thomas Whitmore, Michael repeated. The name felt right in his mouth, like something he'd heard before but forgotten. "There's more," Curtis continued. "I checked with the charity event venue. Someone matching his description was there Monday night. The ticket was purchased by cash listed under the same name. This guy really wants to stay under the radar. Michael stared at the paper. Thomas Whitmore, 5 Bulls games, 1 charity event, all cash purchases, no trail, no way to track him except by physically spotting him. Did you find an address, a phone number? Michael asked. Curtis shook his head. Cash purchases don't require that information. I'm sorry, MJ, that's all I could get. Michael nodded slowly. You did great, Curtis, thank you, and remember. Between us, I got it. After Curtis left, Michael sat alone on the bench in his practice uniform, the piece of paper in his hands. Thomas Whitmore, the name his mother had half remembered, the man his father had known, the shadow in the stands. Now Michael had a name, but he still didn't have answers. Why was Thomas Whitmore watching him? What did he want? And why, after almost 20 years of absence, had he suddenly reappeared in Michael's life? Michael folded the paper and put it in his pocket. The locker room was empty now, just the hum of fluorescent lights and the smell of sweat and victory. Somewhere out there, Thomas Whitmore was walking away from the United Center, getting into his car, driving to wherever he lived, going about his life while Michael's mind spun with questions and unease. But the next home game was in 3 days, and Michael knew with absolute certainty that Thomas would be there. The pattern was clear now, undeniable, and somehow Michael had to find a way to break it. Step out of this strange dance they were doing and demand the truth, because not knowing was eating him alive, and Michael Jordan didn't leave mysteries unsolved. On the court or off it, he always found a way to win. This time, winning meant finding Thomas Whitmore and looking him in the eye, not from 50 feet away or across a crowded arena, face to face, man to man. And when that moment came, Michael was going to get his answers, no matter what they turned out to be. Michael couldn't wait 3 days. That same night after the game against Charlotte, he drove home and went straight to his office. He didn't eat dinner. He barely said hello to his family. He just closed the door and started pulling boxes down from the top shelf of his closet. Photo albums, old newspapers, scrapbooks his mother had made. Years and years of memories packed away in cardboard boxes that smelled like dust and time. He spread everything out on the floor and began searching. There had to be something, some clue. Some photograph or article or memory that would explain Thomas Whitmore and why he mattered. The first album was from high school. Michael flipped through pages of pictures from Laney High School in Wilmington. Basketball games, pep rallies, championship celebrations. He saw himself at 15, 16, 17, skinny and intense, always with a basketball in his hands. But no Thomas Whitmore, no gray jacket in the background. The second album was older, junior high school. Michael saw himself at 12 and 13, all awkward arms and legs, braces on his teeth. There were pictures of him with his brothers and sisters, pictures of family cookouts, pictures of his father grilling burgers, his mother laughing at something someone said. Still no Thomas. Michael kept going. He opened a box of old newspaper clippings. His mother had saved every article ever written about him, starting from when he was just a kid playing in local youth leagues. Jordan leads team to championship. Local boy shows promise on the court. Young Michael Jordan, a star in the making. Michael smiled despite his frustration. His mother had believed in him before anyone else did, before the colleges came calling, before the NBA, before the world knew his name. He carefully unfolded each yellowed piece of newspaper, studying not just the articles but the photographs. Most were grainy, black and white, the kind local papers printed in the 1970s. They showed basketball courts, teams lined up for group photos, kids shooting layups. Then, in an article from the Wilmington Morning Star dated July 1978, Michael found something. The headline read, "Summer League brings young talent together." Photo showed a youth basketball game at Empire Park. Michael recognized himself immediately, 10 years old, number 12, dribbling down the court. His face was determined even then, jaw set, eyes focused. But it wasn't young Michael that made his heart skip a beat. It was the background. Behind the chain-link fence that surrounded the court, partially hidden by the shadow of an oak tree, stood a man. The photo was grainy and the man was far away, but Michael could make out the basics. Dark hair, thin build, and what looked like a gray jacket. Michael's hands trembled as he held the newspaper closer to his face. He grabbed a magnifying glass from his desk drawer, something he used for signing contracts, and examined the figure more carefully. It was him. It had to be. The posture was the same, standing still while everyone else moved, watching from a distance. Thomas Whitmore had been there, 28 years ago, watching 10-year-old Michael play basketball in Wilmington, North Carolina. Michael sat back on the floor, the newspaper still in his hands. His mind raced through the implications. This wasn't random. This wasn't some fan who had recently discovered Michael Jordan, the basketball legend. This was someone who had been watching him since childhood. Someone who had known him before the fame, before the championships, before any of it mattered to anyone except Michael and his family. But why? What could possibly make someone watch a random kid play basketball for nearly 3 decades? Michael looked at the clock. It was past midnight. He should sleep. He had practice in the morning, but sleep felt impossible now. He picked up the phone and dialed his mother's number again. It rang 4 times before she answered, her voice groggy with sleep. "Michael, baby, what's wrong? It's the middle of the night." "Mama, I need you to think back to 1978, Summer League at Impai Park. Do you remember Thomas Whitmore?" There was a long pause. Michael heard his mother shifting, probably sitting up in bed. When she spoke again, she sounded more awake and more worried. "Michael, why are you asking about this again? What's happening?" "Please, Mama, it's important. What do you remember about him?" His mother sighed. "Not much, honey. Like I said before, he was just a man who used to watch the games sometimes. Your father talked to him a few times, I think. I think your father felt sorry for him." "Sorry for him? Why?" "I don't know all the details," she said slowly. "Your father didn't talk much about it, but I got the impression Thomas had been through something difficult. Maybe the war, Vietnam, you know. A lot of men came back from that war changed, hurt in ways you couldn't see." Michael closed his eyes, processing this. "Did Dad ever tell you why Thomas watched the games? Did he have kids of his own?" "I don't think so," his mother said. "I think that's why your father felt for him. He loved basketball but didn't have children to watch play. So he'd come to the park and watch all the kids. It wasn't just you, Michael. He'd watch whoever was playing." But Michael knew better now. Thomas hadn't been at the United Center watching the whole Bulls team. He'd been watching Michael specifically. The same way he'd probably been watching specifically at Impai Park, even if Michael's parents hadn't realized it at the time. "What happened to him?" Michael asked. "You said he disappeared." "Yes, sometime in 1979, I think. One summer he was there, the next summer he wasn't. Your father mentioned it once, said he wondered if Thomas had moved away or if something had happened to him. But we never found out." Michael's throat felt tight. Did Dad ever say anything else about him? Anything at all? His mother was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft. "Your father said Thomas was a good man who'd had a hard life. He said Thomas understood things, about sacrifice, about loyalty, about what it means to keep going when everything feels impossible. I remember that because it was such a specific thing for your father to say." Tears pricked at Michael's eyes. His father had always been good at seeing the best in people, at understanding their struggles. It was one of the things Michael had loved most about him. "Mama, I need to ask you something else," Michael said. "Did Dad know Thomas in the years before he died?" "Before he was murdered," his mother said, her voice catching slightly on the word. Even after 3 years, it was hard for her to say. "I don't think so, baby. Why?" Michael didn't know how to answer that. He didn't know how to explain the feeling growing in his chest, that Thomas Whitmore's reappearance now, 3 years after James Jordan's death, meant something, that it was connected somehow. "Just wondering," Michael said. "I'm sorry I woke you up, Mama. Go back to sleep." "Michael James Jordan," his mother said firmly. "You tell me what's going on right now." So he did. He told her about seeing Thomas at the games, about the charity event, about the pattern of appearances, about the investigation Curtis had done. He told her everything except the part about how scared and confused he felt because even at 32 years old, Michael Jordan didn't like admitting fear to his mother. When he finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "You need to talk to him," his mother finally said. "This man clearly wants something from you or wants to tell you something. Maybe it's about your father, maybe it's something else, but you won't know until you ask." "I know," Michael said. "I'm trying. He keeps disappearing before I can reach him." "Then try harder," his mother said gently. "You're Michael Jordan. You don't give up on anything. Don't start now." After he hung up, Michael sat in his office surrounded by photographs and newspapers and memories. His mother was right. He needed to confront Thomas Whitmore directly. No more watching from across the arena. No more investigation from a distance. But how? The answer came to him slowly, like dawn breaking over Lake Michigan. Thomas kept coming to games. He kept appearing where Michael would see him. He was sending a message: I'm here. I've always been here. Notice me. So Michael would send a message back. The next morning, Michael called Curtis at the United Center. I need you to do something for me, Michael said. Next home game, I want you to buy 3 seats. Section 108, row 12, seats 5 through 7. Leave them empty, completely empty. Can you do that? Sure, Curtis said, confused. But why 3 seats in that specific spot? Because I'm going to make sure Thomas Whitmore knows those seats are for him, Michael said. I'm going to send him an invitation he can't refuse. The next home game was Monday night against the Miami Heat. Michael arrived at the arena 4 hours early, much earlier than usual. He went straight to Curtis. Did you get the seats? Curtis nodded and handed him 3 tickets. Section 108, row 12, seats 5 through 7, all purchased under my name. What's the plan? Michael smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'm going to tell him exactly where I want him to sit. During warm-ups, while the arena was still mostly empty, Michael stood at center court and looked up at section 108. He held up 8 fingers, then 1 finger, then 0, then 8 again. 108. He pointed at the section, then at his own chest, then at the section again. I see you. Sit there, we need to talk. He had no idea if Thomas was watching, no idea if the message would get through, but he had to try. The game started at 7:30. Michael played with fierce concentration. 26 points in the first half. The Bulls were up by 15, but every timeout, every break in the action, Michael's eyes went to section 108, row 12. The seats were empty. First quarter, empty. Second quarter, empty. Halftime, still empty. Michael felt frustration building in his chest. Maybe Thomas wasn't here tonight. Maybe the message hadn't worked. Maybe. Then, with 6 minutes left in the third quarter, Michael saw movement in section 108. A man in a gray jacket was making his way along row 12. He sat down in seat 6, the middle of the 3 empty seats Michael had designated. Thomas Whitmore had received the message, and he had accepted the invitation. Michael's heart pounded so hard he could hear it over the crowd noise. This was it. After the game, there would be no running, no disappearing. They would talk face to face. Michael played the rest of the game in a blur. He scored 18 more points. The Bulls won 103-89. But he barely registered any of it. His mind was already in whatever room they would find to have this conversation, already planning what questions to ask first. As the final buzzer sounded, Michael looked up at section 108 one more time. Thomas Whitmore sat perfectly still, surrounded by celebrating fans. His hands were folded in his lap. His face was calm. And for the first time since Michael had started noticing him, Thomas smiled. Just a small, sad smile. Like he'd been waiting for this moment for a very long time. 20 minutes later, Michael stood in a small office near the Bulls' locker room. It was used for meetings with coaches and occasionally for private conversations with sponsors. Curtis had escorted Thomas Whitmore here and then left, closing the door behind him. Now it was just the two of them. Thomas stood near the window looking out at the Chicago night. He was older up close, maybe 55 instead of 50. His gray jacket was worn but clean. His face had lines that spoke of hard years and difficult memories. Michael's mouth felt dry. He'd faced down the toughest defenders in basketball. He'd hit game-winning shots with millions watching. But this moment felt harder than any of that. "Mr. Whitmore," Michael said quietly. Thomas turned to face him. His eyes were the same intense eyes from the stands, but up close Michael could see they were also kind. Tired but kind. "Mr. Jordan," Thomas said. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. "Thank you for not having security throw me out." "Why would I do that?" "Because I've been following you," Thomas said simply. "Showing up at your games, I know how it must look." Michael crossed his arms. "Then help me understand how it should look, because right now I'm confused and honestly a little angry. I found a newspaper photo from 1978 with you in it. That's 28 years ago. I was 10 years old. So I need you to tell me right now. Who are you and why have you been watching me my entire life?" Thomas nodded slowly like he'd expected this question, like he'd been preparing for it for years. "The truth is complicated," Thomas said, "but I'll try to explain. I knew your father, Michael. James Jordan saved my life." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Michael grabbed the back of a chair to steady himself. "What do you mean he saved your life?" Thomas walked to the other chair and sat down heavily, like a man carrying a weight too large for one person. He gestured for Michael to sit too. Michael sat, and Thomas Whitmore began to tell a story that would change everything Michael thought he knew. "I came back from Vietnam in 1975, Thomas said, staring at his hands. "I was 28 years old, but I felt like I was 100. The war took something from me, took it from all of us who went over there." Michael leaned forward in his chair. He wanted to interrupt to ask about his father, but something told him to let Thomas tell this his own way. "I had no family left," Thomas continued. "My parents died while I was overseas. No wife, no children. I came back to North Carolina because it was the only place I knew, but I didn't know how to live anymore, didn't know how to be around people." Thomas's voice was quiet but steady, like he'd rehearsed these words many times in his head. "I ended up on the streets, sleeping under bridges, in parks, wherever I could find a spot. I wasn't dangerous, just broken, just trying to make it through each day without falling apart completely." Michael felt his throat tight. He'd heard stories about Vietnam veterans. His father had talked about them sometimes, about how the country had failed them when they came home. "One night in the summer of 1977, I was sleeping under the bleachers at Impai Park. I woke up to someone shaking my shoulder. I thought it was the police coming to chase me away, but it was your father." Michael's breath caught. He could picture it perfectly. His father would have been in his late 30s then, working at a factory during the day and spending evenings watching his kids play basketball. "James didn't yell at me or tell me to leave," Thomas said, and now his eyes were wet with tears. "He asked if I was hungry. When I said yes, he went to his car and brought me a sandwich and a thermos of coffee. He sat down on the ground next to me, right there under those bleachers, and we ate together." Thomas wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "He asked my name, asked where I was from, asked if I'd served. When I told him about Vietnam, he didn't look away like most people did. He just nodded and said, 'Thank you for your service. I'm sorry it was so hard.'" Michael felt tears burning in his own eyes. That sounded exactly like his father. James Jordan had always seen people, really seen them when everyone else looked through them. "Your father came back the next night with more food, and the night after that. For 2 weeks straight, he brought me dinner and sat with me, talked to me like I was a human being, not a problem to be solved or a crazy person to be avoided." "What did you talk about?" Michael asked quietly. Thomas smiled. "Basketball mostly. Your father loved basketball. He talked about his kids, about you and your brothers and sisters. He talked about how you were small for your age but had something special, a fire in you, a need to be the best." Michael's chest felt tight. He was 10 years old in 1977, still just a kid who loved to play. He hadn't made varsity yet, hadn't become a star, but his father had already seen something in him. "After 2 weeks, your father helped me get into a veteran's shelter. He drove me there himself, helped me fill out the paperwork, got me connected with counselors who understood what I'd been through. He checked on me every week to make sure I was okay." Thomas leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Michael, your father saved my life. I was drowning and he threw me a rope. Without him, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd probably be dead." Michael didn't trust himself to speak. He just nodded for Thomas to continue. "After a few months, I got better, got a job at a warehouse, found a small apartment, started putting the pieces of my life back together. And I wanted to thank your father, but I didn't know how. What do you give to the man who gave you back your life?" Thomas's voice grew softer. "Then one day your father told me about a game you had coming up, a big tournament. He was so proud of you, Michael, so excited to watch you play. And I thought, maybe I can't repay James Jordan, but maybe I can honor him by watching what he loves most, by seeing what he sees when he looks at his son." "So you came to my games," Michael said. "Yes," Thomas said. "At first, just that one tournament. But then I saw what your father meant. You were 10 years old, but you played like the court was the only place in the world that mattered. You played with joy and anger and determination all mixed together. You played like you were trying to prove something to everyone, including yourself." Thomas stood up and walked to the window again, looking out at the Chicago skyline. I kept coming back, every game I could make it to. I never told your father. I didn't want him to think I was strange or obsessive. I just came and watched from a distance, watched you grow up, watched you become everything your father believed you would be. Michael stood too, his emotions swirling. Why didn't you ever introduce yourself? Why just watch from far away? Because it wasn't about me, Thomas said, turning to face him. It was about honoring the man who saved me. Your father gave me a reason to live. Watching you became my way of saying thank you. Does that make sense? Michael thought about it. In a strange way, it did make sense. Thomas had been carrying a debt he could never repay. Watching Michael's journey had been his way of staying connected to the man who changed his life. You said you disappeared in 1979, Michael said. What happened? Thomas's face clouded. I had a setback. The memories from the war came back hard. I ended up in a veterans hospital for a long time. Years. When I finally got out and got stable again, you were gone. You'd moved away to college. I'd missed your high school career completely. So why come back now? Michael asked. Why show up at my games this year? Thomas reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a worn leather notebook, the same one Michael had seen him writing in during the games. Because I made a promise, Thomas said quietly, and I've been waiting 3 years to keep it. Michael's heart started beating faster. A promise to who? Thomas looked directly into Michael's eyes. To your father, Michael. I made a promise to James Jordan. The room went completely silent. Michael could hear his own breathing, could hear the distant sound of people in the hallways outside, but none of it seemed real. What are you talking about? Michael's voice came out barely above a whisper. My father died in 1993. You said you lost track of me after 1979. I found him again, Thomas said, in 1993, 3 months before he died. Michael felt like the floor had dropped out from under him. What? Thomas opened the leather notebook. Inside were pages and pages of notes, written in small, careful handwriting, dates, observations, details about Michael's games, his career, his life. I came back to North Carolina in 1992, Thomas said. I'd been living in different places trying to get my life together, but I always wondered about you, about whether you'd made it. Then one day I saw you on television, playing for the Bulls, winning championships. And I knew James's belief in you had been right. Thomas's voice shook slightly. I went to Wilmington to see if your parents still lived there. They did. I worked up the courage to knock on their door one day. Your mother answered. She didn't remember me. Why would she? I was just some homeless man from years ago. But when I asked for James, he came to the door, and he remembered me immediately. Michael sat back down. His legs felt weak. Your father invited me in. We sat in his living room and talked for hours. I told him how his kindness had saved me, how I'd watched you play as a kid, how grateful I was for everything he'd done. What did he say? Michael asked. Thomas smiled sadly. He said he was just doing what any decent person would do. Then he asked if I was still watching you play. I told him no, that I'd lost track of you for years. He got this look on his face, this serious, thoughtful look. Thomas sat back down across from Michael. He said, Thomas, I need you to do something for me. He went to his desk and wrote something. Then he put it in an envelope and sealed it. He told me to keep it safe. He said, one day Michael is going to need this, but not yet, not until he's won his 4th championship. Michael felt cold all over. His 4th championship. How could he know I'd win 4 championships? I'd only won 2 at that point. I asked him the same thing, Thomas said. He just smiled and said, I know my son, he won't stop at 3. 4 is when he'll have proven everything to everyone else. That's when he'll need to remember what really matters. Michael's mind raced. His father had died in July 1993, just months after the Bulls won their 3rd straight championship. Michael had been devastated. He'd retired from basketball, unable to imagine playing without his father there to watch. Then he'd come back in 1995, won his 4th championship in 1996, just a few months ago. Where's the envelope? Michael asked. Thomas shook his head. Not yet. Your father had other instructions. He said I needed to make myself known to you first. Let you see me, let you wonder, let you search for answers. He said you'd need to be ready to hear what he wrote. ready to understand it. That doesn't make any sense. Michael stood up, frustration flooding through him. My father wrote me something 3 years ago and you're just sitting on it. I had a right to see it when he died. Your father knew what he was doing, Thomas said calmly. He knew you better than anyone. He said if I gave you the letter too soon, you wouldn't really hear it. You'd be too angry, too lost in grief. But if I waited, if I let you come back to basketball, win again, prove you could still be great even without him watching, then you'd be ready. Michael wanted to argue, wanted to demand the envelope right now. But deep down, he wondered if his father had been right. In 1993, Michael had been drowning in grief. He couldn't have heard anything except his own pain. But now, in 1996, after coming back to basketball and winning his 4th championship, he was stronger. Still sad, still missing his father every day, but strong enough to maybe hear whatever message James Jordan had left behind. Tell me something, Michael said, sitting back down. At the game where you held up the sign with the seat numbers, you were crying. Why? Thomas's eyes filled with tears again. Because that was the moment I knew the time was right. You'd won your 4th championship a few weeks earlier, and in that game I saw something in the way you played, a maturity, a completeness. You weren't just trying to win anymore. You were playing for the love of it, the way you did when you were 10 years old. Thomas pulled out a handkerchief and wiped his eyes. Your father told me I'd know when you were ready, he said. When you look at Michael and see not just the champion, but the boy who loved basketball before it meant anything, that's when you'll know. And that night, I saw both. I saw the champion and the boy together, so I knew it was time. Michael felt overwhelmed. Everything he thought he understood about the past few weeks was shifting, reorganizing into something bigger and stranger and somehow more meaningful. So what happens now? Michael asked. Thomas looked at his watch. Now you go win this championship. Michael frowned. What? The finals, Thomas said. You're in the middle of the NBA finals. Your father specifically said I had to wait until after your 4th ring, not during the finals, after. He said you'd need all your focus on the court, that I shouldn't distract you with his words until the job was done. Michael almost laughed. Even from beyond the grave, his father was coaching him, telling him to focus on the game, to finish what he started before worrying about anything else. So you're saying I have to wait, again? Just a little longer, Thomas said gently. Win this championship, your 4th ring. Then I'll tell you everything. I'll show you what your father left for you, and I'll explain the rest of what he asked me to do. There's more, Michael asked. Thomas smiled. Your father was a thorough man. He thought about every detail. Yes, there's more, but it can wait a few more days. Michael stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Chicago glowed with lights. People were going about their lives, unaware that in this small office the past and present were colliding in ways that felt almost impossible. Can I ask you something? Michael said, not turning around. Anything. In 1993, when my father gave you that envelope, did he know something was going to happen to him? The silence that followed was long and heavy. I don't know, Thomas finally said, and his voice was thick with emotion. I've asked myself that same question 1,000 times. He seemed different that day, more serious, more urgent. He said things like, if anything happens to me and in case I'm not there. At the time, I thought he was just being careful, but after he was murdered. Thomas trailed off. Michael turned around. You think he had a feeling something was coming? I think your father was a wise man who understood the world could be dangerous, Thomas said carefully. I think he wanted to make sure you had what you needed, no matter what happened. Whether that was intuition or just fatherly caution, I'll never know. Michael felt anger rising in his chest, not at Thomas but at the universe, at the random violence that had taken his father away, at the fact that James Jordan had felt the need to write a letter to his son just in case he didn't make it. 3 days before he died, he called me, Thomas said quietly. He asked if I still had the envelope. I told him yes. He said, good, keep it safe, keep your promise. Michael will need it someday. Michael's eyes burned with tears. 3 days before his murder, his father had been thinking about him, making sure Thomas would follow through, making sure Michael would someday get whatever message James had left behind. I will win this championship, Michael said, his voice steady despite his tears. Not because you or my father told me to, But because that's what I do, I finish what I start. And then you and I are going to sit down again, and you're going to show me that envelope, and you're going to tell me everything my father said to you. Every single word. Understood?" Thomas nodded, understood. They stood there for a moment, two men connected by the memory of a third man who had changed both their lives. "Thank you," Michael finally said, "for honoring your promise, for watching over me all these years, for being loyal to my father even when he wasn't here anymore." "It was the least I could do," Thomas said. "Your father gave me a reason to live. You've given me a reason to keep living. Watching you become exactly what he knew you would be, that's been the greatest gift." Michael walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. "Will you come to the next game?" he asked. "I'll be there," Thomas said. "Same section, seat number 6, watching like I always have." "Good," Michael said, "because this time you're not watching a stranger, you're watching family." Thomas's face crumpled with emotion. He couldn't speak, just nodded. Michael opened the door and walked out into the bright hallway. Behind him, Thomas Whitmore sat in the quiet office, finally able to rest after years of carrying a secret. The promise was almost kept. Just one more game, one more championship. Then he could give Michael Jordan what his father had left behind. And maybe, just maybe, they could both find some peace. Michael barely slept that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind spinning with everything Thomas had told him. His father had known. 3 months before his death, James Jordan had somehow known to prepare a message for his son. And 3 days before he was murdered, he'd called Thomas to make sure the promise would be kept. How do you know something like that? How do you feel death coming? Beside him, Juanita stirred in her sleep. Michael turned to look at her face, peaceful in the darkness. He wanted to wake her up, to tell her everything. But what would he say? That a man he'd suspected of stalking him was actually a guardian angel sent by his dead father. It sounded crazy even in his own head. But it was true. All of it was true. Michael got out of bed quietly and went downstairs to his office. He turned on the small lamp on his desk and pulled out the newspaper photo from 1978 again. Thomas Whitmore standing behind the fence at Empire Park, watching 10-year-old Michael play basketball. "What did you see in me, Dad?" Michael whispered to the empty room. "What made you think I'd need a message 18 years later?" The photo didn't answer. It just showed a father's love captured in newsprint, James Jordan believing in his son before the world knew his name. Michael put the photo down and picked up the piece of paper Curtis had given him. Thomas Whitmore. The name of the man who'd been carrying his father's secret for 3 years. 3 years of waiting. 3 years of watching Michael retire, struggle with grief, come back to basketball, and fight his way to another championship. All while holding an envelope that might contain answers Michael desperately needed. What had his father written? What could be so important that it needed to wait for the 4th championship? What message was worth 3 years of silence? Michael looked at the clock. 3:47 a.m. In a few hours, he'd need to be at practice. The Bulls were tied 2-2 in the finals against the Seattle Supersonics. Game 5 was tomorrow night. Win, and the Bulls would be 1 game away from the championship. Lose, and they'd go back to Seattle down 3-2, fighting for survival. His father had been right about one thing: Michael needed to focus on the game. The envelope could wait a few more days. The finals couldn't, but knowing that didn't make it any easier to stop thinking about it. Michael went through practice like a machine. His body did what it always did, ran the plays, took the shots, played defense. But his teammates noticed something was off. "You're quiet today," Scottie Pippen said during a water break. "Everything okay?" Michael nodded, just focused. Game 5 got to be ready. Scottie studied him with the look of someone who'd been playing alongside Michael for years. Someone who knew when Michael Jordan was telling the truth and when he was hiding something. "You sure?" Scottie pressed. "Because you've been acting strange for weeks now. If something's going on, you can tell me." Michael almost did tell him, almost explained about Thomas, about the envelope, about his father's mysterious message from beyond the grave. But he stopped himself. This was something he needed to carry alone, at least until after the championship. "I'm good, Pip," Michael said. "Promise, let's just win this thing." Scottie didn't look convinced, but he let it go. That evening, Michael sat with his family at dinner. His 3 children, Jeffrey, Marcus, and Jasmine, were talking about school, about friends, about their own basketball games. Normal kid stuff. Beautiful, ordinary life happening all around him, but Michael felt like he was watching from behind glass, present but not really there. "Daddy, are you going to win tomorrow?" Jasmine asked. She was 5 years old with her mother's eyes and Michael's competitive spirit. "I'm going to try my best," Michael said, forcing a smile. "You always win when you try your best," she said with the absolute confidence only a 5-year-old could have. Michael felt his throat tight. If only it were that simple. If only trying your best was always enough. If only his father's best efforts to be careful had been enough to keep him alive. After dinner, Juanita cornered him in the kitchen while the kids watched TV in the other room. "Talk to me," she said. It wasn't a question. It was a command from someone who loved him too much to watch him suffer in silence. So Michael told her everything, about meeting Thomas, about his father saving Thomas's life, about the envelope and the promise and the waiting. All of it spilled out in a rush of words. Juanita listened without interrupting. When he finished, she pulled him into a hug and held him tight. "Oh, Michael," she said softly, "your father, even after death, he's still taking care of you." "But why wait?" Michael asked, his voice muffled against her shoulder. "Why make me wait 3 years? Why not just leave the letter with Mom or with you or with someone who could give it to me right away?" Juanita pulled back and looked at him. "Because your father knew you. He knew you'd need to be in the right place to hear whatever he had to say. And maybe he was right. Maybe in 1993 you couldn't have heard it." Michael thought about that. In 1993, he'd been so destroyed by his father's death that he'd walked away from basketball completely. He'd retired at the peak of his career because the game felt meaningless without his father there to share it. But now, in 1996, he was back. He'd proven he could still play at the highest level. He'd won his 4th championship. He was whole again, or as whole as someone could be after losing their father. Maybe James Jordan had known his son needed to rebuild himself before he could receive whatever message waited in that envelope. "I just want to know what he wrote," Michael said. "I want to hear from him again, even if it's just words on paper." "You will," Juanita said, squeezing his hands. "In a few days, you'll win this championship, and then you'll get to hear your father's voice again. That's something to fight for, isn't it?" Michael nodded. She was right. The envelope was something to fight for, another reason to win, another reason to be great. His father had left him a gift, and Michael was going to earn it. Game 5 of the NBA Finals was at the United Center. The arena was packed, the energy electric. This was what Michael lived for, the pressure, the stakes, the whole world watching to see if he could deliver. Before tip-off, Michael looked up at section 108, row 12, seat 6. Thomas Whitmore was there, wearing his gray jacket, holding his leather notebook. When their eyes met, Thomas gave a small nod, a gesture that said, "I'm here, I'm watching, just like your father asked me to." Michael nodded back. Then he turned his attention to the court. For the next 2.5 hours, Michael Jordan played basketball the way it was meant to be played. He scored 26 points. He grabbed 9 rebounds. He dished out 7 assists. He played defense like his life depended on it. But more than the numbers, there was something different in how he played. A freedom, a joy, like he was playing for someone beyond himself, like he was showing his father through Thomas's eyes that everything James Jordan had believed about his son was true. The Bulls won 89-78. They were now up 3-2 in the series. One more win and they'd be champions again. After the game, in the locker room, Michael's teammates sprayed champagne and screamed with excitement. They were one win away from glory. One more game. But Michael's mind was already beyond the next game, to what would come after, to the envelope and the promise and the message his father had left behind. 2 days later, the Bulls flew to Seattle for Game 6. Michael sat on the plane looking out the window at clouds passing below. Somewhere down there was the life he'd built, the championships, the fame, the legacy. But somewhere else in Thomas Whitmore's possession was something more important than all of it: his father's words. His father's wisdom. His father's love reaching across the grave to touch him one more time. The game was on Sunday, June 16, 1996, Father's Day. Michael hadn't realized it until that morning. The Bulls could win the championship on Father's Day, his 4th ring. The moment Thomas had been waiting for, the moment his father had predicted. It felt like destiny, or like his father was still coaching from somewhere beyond, arranging all the pieces just right. The Key Arena in Seattle was hostile territory. Supersonics fans filled every seat, waving green and yellow everywhere, screaming for their team. Gary Payton was guarding Michael aggressively. Shawn Kemp was dominating the paint. This was going to be a battle, but Michael was ready. In the first quarter, he scored 9 points. In the second quarter, 8 more. By halftime, the Bulls were up by 7 and Michael had 17 points. In the locker room, Coach Phil Jackson drew up plays on the whiteboard. Talked about defensive assignments, reminded everyone to stay focused, but when he looked at Michael, Phil paused. "You okay, Mike?" he asked quietly. Michael nodded. "Never better, Phil, let's finish this." And he meant it, because on the other side of this game, on the other side of victory, was something he'd been waiting 3 years to receive. The third quarter was brutal. The Supersonics came out fighting, cutting the lead to 3 points. The crowd was deafening. Every possession mattered. Every shot felt huge. Michael scored 12 points in the quarter. He hit impossible fadeaways. He drove through triple teams. He played like a man possessed. By the end of the third quarter, the Bulls were up by 9. One more quarter, 12 minutes of basketball. That's all that stood between Michael and his 4th championship. In the huddle before the 4th quarter started, Michael looked at his teammates, at Scotty, who'd been with him through everything, at Dennis Rodman, the wild genius on the boards, at all of them sweating and tired and ready to fight. "This is it," Michael said. "This is what we came here for. Let's bring this home." They broke the huddle with a unified shout. The 4th quarter began. For the first 8 minutes of the quarter, it was a war. Seattle wouldn't quit. They cut the lead to 5, then to 3. With 4 minutes left, the game was tied at 75. The crowd was screaming so loud Michael couldn't hear the play calls. Didn't matter. He knew what to do. He'd been here before. He took the ball at the top of the key. Gary Payton was in his face, hands up, talking trash. Michael dribbled once, twice. Time seemed to slow down. He thought about his father, about the envelope, about Thomas Whitmore watching from somewhere taking notes, about everything this moment meant. Then Michael rose up and shot. The ball left his fingertips with perfect rotation. It arced through the air over Payton's outstretched hand toward the basket. Swish. Bulls up by 2. Seattle called timeout. 3 minutes and 40 seconds left in the game. The final minutes were a blur of intensity. Seattle scored. The Bulls answered. Back and forth, neither team giving an inch. With 1 minute left, the Bulls were up by 4. Seattle had the ball. Payton drove, but Scotty forced a bad pass. Michael grabbed the steal and was fouled. He went to the free throw line. The crowd booed so loud the arena shook. But Michael didn't hear it. He was in his own world now. A place of perfect focus where nothing existed except the rim and the ball and the memory of his father teaching him how to shoot free throws on that cracked court in Wilmington. Keep your elbow in. Follow through, wrist straight. Michael made both free throws. Bulls up by 6, 43 seconds left. Seattle scored quickly. Bulls up by 4, 31 seconds left. The Bulls inbounded the ball. Michael caught it and was immediately fouled. Back to the line, 2 more free throws, both good. Bulls up by 6, 23 seconds left. Seattle scored again. Bulls up by 4, 15 seconds left. The Bulls just needed to inbound the ball and run out the clock. Scotty threw it to Michael. Michael dribbled away from the desperate defenders. The clock ticked down. 10 seconds, 5 seconds, 3, 2, 1. The buzzer sounded. The Chicago Bulls were NBA champions again. Michael's 4th ring. The celebration on the court was chaos, players jumping on each other, confetti falling from the ceiling, reporters shoving microphones in faces. But Michael stood in the middle of it all, feeling strangely calm. He'd done it. Everything his father had predicted. 4 championships, and on Father's Day no less. Michael looked up into the crowd, scanning for section 108. But they weren't at the United Center. They were in Seattle. Thomas wasn't here. Or was he? Michael's eyes swept the arena, and there in the upper deck he saw a flash of gray. A man standing perfectly still while everyone around him celebrated or mourned. Thomas Whitmore had come to Seattle, had watched the final game, had been there to see the moment James Jordan had predicted years ago. Michael pointed at him. Thomas saw the gesture and placed his hand over his heart. Then he held up the leather notebook, a signal that said, "The time has come. The promise is ready to be kept." Michael felt tears running down his face. Not just tears of victory, but tears of loss and love and gratitude all mixed together. His teammates were spraying champagne. Scotty was trying to put a championship hat on his head. But Michael's attention was on Thomas and on the envelope that was finally ready to be opened. "I did it, Dad," Michael whispered, looking up at the arena lights. "I won 4, just like you said. Now tell me what you wanted me to know." 3 hours later, after the trophy ceremony and the interviews and the locker room celebration, Michael sat alone in the visiting team's office. He'd asked security to find Thomas Whitmore and bring him here. The door opened. Thomas walked in carrying his leather notebook and a manila envelope that looked old and worn. Michael stood up. His heart was pounding harder than it had during the game. "You did it," Thomas said, his voice thick with emotion. "4 championships, just like your father said. He would be so proud, Michael." "Show me," Michael said. "Please, show me what he left for me." Thomas nodded. He sat down and placed the envelope on the desk between them. Michael's name was written on it in his father's handwriting. "To Michael, for when you've won it all." "Before I give this to you," Thomas said, "I need to tell you about the last conversation I had with your father, 3 days before he died." Michael sat down, his eyes never leaving the envelope. "He called me early in the morning," Thomas said. "Asked if I was keeping my promise. I told him yes, of course. The envelope was safe. Then he got quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, 'Thomas, something doesn't feel right. I can't explain it, but I want to make sure Michael gets that letter no matter what happens.'" Michael's blood ran cold. He knew something was wrong. "I think he felt it," Thomas said carefully. "Maybe not specifically what would happen, but that danger was close. He told me he'd been getting strange phone calls, people asking about money, about debts. He wasn't involved in anything wrong. Your father was a good man, but he'd gotten tangled up in something by accident." Michael's hands clenched into fists. He knew this story. His father had been murdered during a robbery. 2 men had shot him while he slept in his car at a rest stop. The senseless violence had destroyed Michael's world. He said, "If anything happens to me, make sure Michael knows he made me the proudest father in the world," Thomas continued, tears rolling down his face. Those were his exact words, "the proudest father in the world." And he said to wait until after the 4th championship, because that's when you'd need to hear from him most. "Why?" Michael asked, his voice breaking. "Why after 4? Why not right away? Why not when I needed him most?" Thomas looked at him with deep sadness and understanding. "Because your father knew that after 4 championships, the world would be telling you you're the greatest, and he wanted to make sure you remembered what really made you great. Not the rings, not the fame, something else." Thomas pushed the envelope across the desk. "He made me promise one more thing," Thomas said, "that I wouldn't just give you this letter and disappear, that I'd stay in your life, be a friend, be someone who remembers your father and can keep his memory alive. He said, 'Thomas, you'll be the link between who Michael was and who he becomes. Don't let him forget where he came from.'" Michael picked up the envelope with shaking hands. It was sealed with tape that had yellowed with age. Inside was his father's voice, frozen in time, waiting 3 years to speak to him again. "Thank you," Michael whispered to Thomas. "Thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for watching over me. Thank you for bringing me this." "It was my honor," Thomas said. "Your father saved my life. You gave my life meaning. I'm the one who should be thanking you." Michael stood up, holding the envelope carefully like it might break. "I need to be alone when I read this, but I want you to come to Chicago, stay for a few days. We have a lot to talk about." Thomas nodded. "I'll be there." They shook hands, but then Michael pulled Thomas into a hug. The older man stiffened in surprise, then hugged him back, both of them crying. When they finally pulled apart, Michael said, "You're not just the messenger anymore. You're family. Understand?" "I understand," Thomas said, his voice choked with emotion. Michael walked out of the office, the envelope pressed against his chest. Outside, his teammates were boarding the plane back to Chicago. The championship trophy was already loaded, ready to return home. But Michael carried something more valuable than any trophy. He carried his father's final words, written in 1993, waiting until 1996, ready to be read on Father's Day after the 4th championship. Everything his father had predicted had come true. Now Michael would finally learn what James Jordan had wanted him to know. Michael sat alone in his hotel room in Seattle. The city was still celebrating outside. Fireworks, car horns, people shouting in the streets even though it was the Supersonics who had lost. Everyone loved basketball on championship night, win or lose. But Michael barely heard any of it. He sat on the edge of the bed, the envelope in his hands. His father's handwriting on the front. The tape yellowed and brittle after 3 years. "To Michael, for when you've won it all." His hands trembled as he turned the envelope over and over. Part of him wanted to tear it open immediately, to read his father's words and feel close to him again, even if just for a moment. But another part of him was afraid. What if the letter disappointed him? What if it didn't say what he needed to hear? What if it made the grief worse instead of better? Michael set the envelope on the nightstand and walked to the window. Seattle stretched out below him, lights twinkling in the darkness. Somewhere out there, Thomas Whitmore was probably in his own hotel room, finally able to rest after carrying this burden for 3 years. Michael pulled out his phone and dialed. His mother answered on the second ring. "Michael, baby, congratulations. 4 championships. I'm so proud of you." "Thanks, Mama." His voice sounded strange to his own ears, distant. "What's wrong? You should be celebrating." "Mama, did Dad ever tell you he wrote me a letter? In 1993, a few months before he died." The silence on the other end told him everything. "You knew," Michael said quietly. "Yes," his mother said after a moment. "He told me he was writing something for you, but he said it was private between father and son. He asked me not to mention it unless you asked." "Why didn't you tell me after he died?" "Because I didn't know where the letter was," Dolores said. "Your father said he'd taken care of it. That someone trustworthy had it and would give it to you when the time was right. I figured if it was meant to reach you, it would." Michael sat back down on the bed. "It reached me tonight after the game." He heard his mother's sharp intake of breath. "Have you read it yet?" "No, I'm scared too." "Oh, baby." Her voice was soft and full of understanding. "Your father loved you more than anything in this world. Whatever he wrote, it came from that love. Don't be afraid of it." After he hung up, Michael picked up the envelope again. His mother was right. This was a gift, not something to fear. He carefully peeled back the tape, trying not to tear the old paper. Inside was a single sheet of yellow legal paper, folded in thirds. His father had always used yellow legal pads for important things: shopping lists, work notes, letters to relatives. Michael unfolded the paper. His father's handwriting filled the page, neat, careful cursive that reminded Michael of watching his father write checks at the kitchen table. He took a deep breath and began to read. "Dear Michael, if you're reading this, it means 2 things. First, I'm gone. I'm sorry for that, son. I wanted to be there to see you win this 4th championship and all the ones that come after. But life doesn't always give us what we want. Second, it means you've won 4 championships. I knew you would. I always knew. From the time you were 8 years old and couldn't make the junior high team, I knew. You had something the other boys didn't have, a fire that wouldn't go out no matter how many times someone tried to put it out. I'm writing this in March 1993. You just won your 3rd straight championship. The whole world is calling you the greatest basketball player who ever lived. And maybe they're right, but I want to make sure you remember something important. You were great before you ever won a championship. You were great when you were 10 years old, sharing your basketball with a kid who didn't have one. You were great at 15 when you helped that elderly woman carry her groceries to her car. You were great at 20 when you spent your whole Saturday teaching basketball to kids at the community center. Championships don't make you great, Michael. They just show the world what I already knew. I'm giving this letter to a friend named Thomas Whitmore. You don't know him, but he knows you. He's been watching you play since you were a boy, and he's seen what I've seen, that you're not just a basketball player. You're a good man who happens to be great at basketball. I asked Thomas to give you this letter after your 4th championship because that's when you'll need it most. After 4, the pressure will be enormous. People will expect you to win forever. They'll expect perfection. They'll forget you're human. Don't let them forget, son. And don't forget it yourself. There's something I never told you. After I came back from watching one of your games, I'd go home and write down what I saw. Not the scores or the stats. Your mother saves those newspaper clippings. I wrote down the moments that made me proud to be your father. Like the time you stayed after a game to sign autographs for every single kid who asked, even though you were exhausted. Like the time you saw a player on the other team get injured and you were the first one to check on him. Like the time you told that reporter that winning didn't matter as much as playing the right way. Those are the moments I treasured, Michael. Those are the moments that made you my son, not just a basketball player. I know I pushed you hard sometimes, maybe too hard. I made you practice when you wanted to quit. I made you run extra laps when you were already tired. I said good job when you wanted to hear great job. I did those things because I believed in you so much that I couldn't let you settle for less than your best. But I want you to know something. If you had quit basketball tomorrow, if you had decided to do something else with your life, I would have been just as proud. Because I wasn't proud of you for the points you scored. I was proud of you for the man you became. By now, 3 years after I wrote this, you've probably felt the weight of grief. You've probably wondered if you could keep playing without me there to watch. You've probably had moments when the game felt meaningless, but you came back. I knew you would. Not because of the championships or the fame, but because basketball is part of who you are. It's how you express yourself. It's your art. So here's what I want you to remember as you move forward. Excellence isn't just about winning. It's about who you are when nobody's watching. Greatness isn't measured in rings. It's measured in how you treat people. Success isn't about being better than everyone else. It's about being better than you were yesterday. I taught you to play basketball, but life taught you to be a man. I'm proud of both lessons. One more thing, son. When your career is over, when the cheering stops and the crowds go home, you'll still be Michael Jordan, not the basketball player, the man. Make sure that man is someone you're proud of. Make sure he's someone who remembers where he came from and helps others get where they're going. Thomas Whitmore is a good man who had a hard life. I helped him once and he's been grateful ever since. I asked him to watch over you because I needed someone else to see what I saw, to be a witness to your journey, to remind you when you need it most that you're more than the points you score. Be kind to Thomas. He's carrying a heavy burden keeping this secret for years, but he's doing it because he promised me, and a promise to a friend is sacred. I love you, Michael. I'm proud of you. Not because you're the greatest basketball player in the world, but because you're my son. And being your father has been the greatest honor of my life. When you're at the top of the mountain, remember this court where you learned to play. Remember the little boy who just loved the game. Don't let success change who that boy was. I'll be watching over you, always. Love, Dad. Michael's vision was blurred with tears by the time he finished reading. He read the letter again, then a third time, memorizing every word. His father's voice came through so clearly on the page that Michael could almost hear him speaking. Excellence isn't just about winning. It's about who you are when nobody's watching. Michael had spent 3 years trying to prove he could still be great without his father. Trying to show the world that James Jordan's son could win even after such terrible loss. And he had proven it. 4 championships. The world agreed Michael Jordan was the greatest, but his father's letter reminded him of something deeper, something more important than any trophy. He was great before the trophies. He was great because of who he was, not what he won. Michael folded the letter carefully and held it against his chest. He could feel his father's presence in the words, in the love that radiated from every line. James Jordan was gone, but this letter brought him back, if only for a moment. There was a knock at the door. Michael wiped his eyes and opened it. Juanita stood there, still in her travel clothes from the flight to Seattle. She must have taken a later plane with the families. "I heard you came straight to your room," she said softly. "I wanted to check on you." Michael didn't trust himself to speak. He just pulled her inside and showed her the letter. She read it silently, tears streaming down her face. When she finished, she looked at him with such love and understanding that Michael broke down completely. "He knew," Michael sobbed. "He knew I'd need this. He knew exactly when I'd need to hear from him." Juanita held him while he cried. All the grief he'd been holding in for 3 years came pouring out. The anger at losing his father so young, the guilt about retiring from basketball, the loneliness of winning without James Jordan there to celebrate with him. "Your father was a wise man," Juanita said, stroking his hair, "and he raised a wise son." They sat together on the bed, Michael's head on her shoulder, the letter between them. Outside, the celebration continued. But in this quiet hotel room, Michael Jordan, 4-time NBA champion, the greatest basketball player in the world, was just a son missing his father. And that was okay. His father's letter had given him permission to be both things, to be great and to be human, to win championships and to remember what really mattered. The next morning, Michael called Thomas Whitmore. "I read it," Michael said simply, and Thomas's voice was hesitant, like he wasn't sure if the letter had been what Michael needed. "It was perfect. He was right about everything, about when I'd need to hear it, about what I'd need to remember." Michael could hear Thomas exhale with relief. "I'm so glad, Michael. Your father worked hard on that letter. He wrote several drafts trying to get it just right. "There's something I want to do," Michael said. "My father mentioned that court where I learned to play, in Pye Park in Wilmington. I want to go there, and I want you to come with me." "When?" "Today, before we go back to Chicago. I need to stand on that court and remember where it all started." 6 hours later, Michael and Thomas stood at Pye Park in Wilmington, North Carolina. The court looked smaller than Michael remembered. The concrete was more cracked. The chain-link fence had rust spots, but it was still there, still standing after all these years. A few kids were playing basketball, maybe 12 or 13 years old. They looked up as Michael approached and their eyes went wide. "That's Michael Jordan." They dropped their ball and ran over, talking all at once. "Mr. Jordan, can we get your autograph? Will you take a picture with us? Can you show us a move?" Michael smiled. This was exactly what his father's letter had been about. Not the fame or the championships, but moments like this. Kids who loved basketball just like he had loved it at their age. "I'll do you one better," Michael said. "How about we play some basketball? You three against me and Mr. Whitmore here." The kids looked at Thomas, then back at Michael, then started grinning. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious. First to 11 points, let's go." For the next 30 minutes, Michael Jordan, 4-time NBA champion, Olympic gold medalist, the man called the greatest basketball player who ever lived, played pickup basketball with 3 kids on a cracked court in North Carolina. He didn't dominate them. He let them score, taught them moves, corrected their form. Thomas mostly passed the ball and encouraged everyone, keeping score and calling fouls. It was the most fun Michael had had in months, maybe years. Because it wasn't about winning or championships or proving anything. It was just about basketball, pure and simple, the way it had been when he was their age. When the game ended, Michael and Thomas won 11-9. The kids were breathless and grinning. Michael signed their basketball and took pictures with them. "Remember something," Michael told them as they prepared to leave. "Basketball is a game. Play it because you love it, not because you want to be famous. The love has to come first. Everything else is just extra." The kids nodded seriously, like he just shared the secret to the universe. Maybe he had. After they left, Michael and Thomas sat on the same bench where James Jordan used to watch his son play. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the court. "My father sat right here," Michael said quietly. "Hundreds of times, watching me practice, watching me learn, believing in me before I believed in myself." "He never missed a game if he could help it," Thomas said. "Even when you were terrible, he was here." Michael laughed. "I was pretty terrible at first." "You were," Thomas agreed. "But your father never looked at what you were. He always looked at what you could become. That's a rare gift in a parent." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the shadows lengthen. "In the letter," Michael said, "my father mentioned that you've been documenting my journey, writing things down in that notebook of yours." Thomas nodded. "For over 25 years, every game I could attend, every article I could find. I wanted to create a record of who you were, not just what you accomplished." "Can I see it?" Thomas hesitated, then pulled the leather notebook from his jacket. He handed it to Michael. Michael opened it carefully. The pages were filled with Thomas's small, neat handwriting, dates and observations going back to 1978. July 12, 1978, Michael stayed after practice for an extra hour. Not because anyone told him to, but because he wanted to get better. James watched from the bench, smiling. March 3, 1982, Michael's team lost the championship game. Afterwards, but then he shook hands with every player on the winning team and congratulated them. James told him he was proud of how he handled defeat. June 15, 1991, Michael won his first NBA championship. In the locker room celebration, the first thing he did was call his parents. I could see James in the crowd, tears streaming down his face. October 6, 1993, Michael announced his retirement. The sports world is shocked. I'm not. He's grieving. Basketball doesn't matter when your heart is broken. March 18, 1995, Michael is coming back. I don't know if he's ready, but I understand why he needs to try. Basketball was his connection to his father. Maybe playing again will help him heal. Page after page of observations spanning decades. A chronicle of Michael's life written by someone who had watched from the shadows, bearing witness to a promise made to James Jordan. "This is incredible," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. You've been documenting my life like a guardian angel. I just wanted your father to know I kept my promise, Thomas said. Even after he died, I kept watching, kept recording, because that's what he asked me to do. Michael closed the notebook and handed it back. My father's letter said I should be kind to you, that you're carrying a heavy burden. He was right. It wasn't a burden, Thomas said firmly. It was an honor. Your father gave me a purpose when I had none. Watching you become exactly what he knew you would be, that's been the greatest privilege of my life. Michael felt tears welling up again. How many times could a person cry in one day? But these were good tears, grateful tears. I want you to keep coming to games, Michael said. Not hiding in the crowd, but sitting in good seats, as my guest. And after my career is over, I want you to help me with something. What's that? I want to create a foundation in my father's name. Something that helps kids learn basketball but also teaches them what my father taught me, about character, about excellence, about being a good person. And I want you to be part of it, to share what you observed over all these years. Thomas's eyes widened. Michael, I don't know anything about running a foundation. You know about keeping promises. You know about loyalty. You know about honoring someone's memory. That's all that matters. Thomas was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the basketball court where everything had begun. Your father would like that, he finally said. He'd like it very much. They sat together as the sun disappeared completely, leaving the court in darkness. But Michael didn't feel the darkness. He felt light. For the first time since his father's death, he felt like he understood the path forward. His father had left him more than a letter. He'd left him a mission, to remember where he came from, to stay true to who he was, to use his greatness not just for himself but to lift others up. And he'd left him Thomas Whitmore, a living reminder of kindness, of promises kept, of loyalty that lasted decades. Thank you, Michael said to Thomas, for everything, for honoring my father, for watching over me, for being here tonight. Thank you for letting me, Thomas replied, for understanding why I needed to keep this promise. They stood up and walked toward the parking lot where Michael's rental car waited. Behind them, Empire Park sat quiet and empty under the stars. The same court where James Jordan had taught his son to shoot free throws. The same court where 10-year-old Michael had dreamed of being great. He'd achieved that dream. 4 championships. The greatest player in the world. But tonight, standing on that court with Thomas Whitmore, Michael realized he'd achieved something even more important. He'd become the man his father had raised him to be, and that was worth more than all the championships in the world. Michael and Thomas flew back to Chicago the next day. The city was ready to explode with celebration. The Bulls had won their 4th championship in 6 years. Parade plans were already in motion. News trucks lined the streets outside the United Center, but Michael wasn't thinking about parades or celebrations. He was thinking about his father's words, reading the letter over and over on the plane. Excellence isn't just about winning. It's about who you are when nobody's watching. When they landed, Michael made a decision. He called a press conference for that afternoon. The media expected him to talk about the championship, about the finals MVP award, about what came next for the Bulls. Instead, Michael stood at the podium with Thomas Whitmore beside him. The press room buzzed with confusion. Who was this older man in the gray jacket? Why was he standing next to Michael Jordan at his championship press conference? Thank you all for coming, Michael began. His voice was steady but softer than usual. I know you're expecting me to talk about basketball, and I will, but first, I need to tell you about someone important. He gestured to Thomas. This is Thomas Whitmore. Some of you might have noticed him at games this season. He's been watching me play basketball since I was 10 years old, and today I want to tell you why. For the next 20 minutes, Michael shared the story about Thomas being a Vietnam veteran who struggled after the war, about his father James Jordan helping Thomas find his way back to life, about the promise Thomas made to watch over Michael, about the letter James had written 3 years ago, predicting Michael would win 4 championships. The room was completely silent. Reporters who usually shouted questions just listened, many of them wiping their eyes. Michael pulled the letter from his jacket pocket. My father wrote this in March 1993, 3 months before he was murdered. He gave it to Thomas and asked him to give it to me after I won my 4th championship. Last night, I finally read it. He looked at the letter, his hands trembling slightly. I'm not going to read the whole thing, it's private between my father and me, but I want to share one part of it. Michael cleared his throat and read, "Championships don't make you great, Michael. They just show the world what I already knew. You were great before you ever won a championship. You were great when you shared your basketball with a kid who didn't have one. You were great when you helped that elderly woman carry her groceries. You were great when you spent your Saturday teaching basketball to kids at the community center. Championships don't make you great. They just show the world what I already knew." Several reporters were crying now, even the tough ones who covered sports for decades. "My father passed away 3 years ago," Michael continued. "But through Thomas, through this letter, he's still teaching me, still guiding me, still reminding me what really matters." Michael turned to Thomas, who was trying hard not to cry. Thomas Whitmore is a hero, not because of what he did in Vietnam, though that matters, but because he kept a promise for over 25 years. He watched over me when I didn't even know I needed watching. He honored my father's memory by being faithful to his word. That's the kind of man we should all aspire to be. The press conference erupted with questions after that, but they were different than usual. Reporters wanted to know more about James Jordan, about the promise, about what the letter meant to Michael. They weren't asking about basketball strategy or playoff matchups. They were asking about things that mattered. That night, Michael sat with his family in their living room. Juanita, his 3 children, and now Thomas, who had accepted Michael's invitation to stay with them for a few days. Jeffrey, who was 7, looked at Thomas with curious eyes. "Mr. Whitmore, did you really know my grandpa?" "I did," Thomas said gently. "Your grandfather was the kindest man I ever met. He saw me when I was hurting and helped me heal." "I miss Grandpa," Jeffrey said quietly. "I know you do," Thomas said. "But you know what? He's still with you. Every time you do something kind, every time you help someone, every time you try your best at something, that's your grandfather living through you." Marcus, who was 5, climbed onto Thomas's lap. "Will you come to my basketball game? Dad's always too busy." Michael felt a pang of guilt, but Thomas just smiled. "I'd love to come to your game. In fact, I'll make you a promise. If you want me at your games, I'll be there, just like I was there for your dad." Michael watched this scene unfold and felt something shift inside him. His father had given him more than a letter. He'd given him Thomas, a man who understood the importance of showing up, of being present, of keeping promises. "Thomas," Michael said, "I meant what I said about the foundation. I want to start it this year, and I want you to be part of the planning." Thomas looked surprised. "Michael, I'm not qualified to." "You're the most qualified person I know," Michael interrupted. "You understand what my father believed. You've spent 25 years observing how character and basketball connect. Nobody else can do what you can do." Juanita nodded. "Michael's right. This foundation needs someone who knew James, someone who can keep his spirit alive in the work." Thomas's eyes filled with tears. "It would be my honor." Over the next 2 weeks, Chicago celebrated. The championship parade drew millions of people. Michael held the trophy high and waved to the crowds. But everywhere he went, Thomas was with him, not as a shadow anymore, but as family. They visited schools together. Michael talked about basketball. Thomas talked about promises and loyalty, and the importance of having people in your life who believe in you. They visited veterans' hospitals. Thomas shared his story of struggle and recovery. Michael talked about his father's kindness and how one person's compassion can change a life. They went to basketball courts in rough neighborhoods. Michael played with kids. Thomas watched and took notes, just like he'd always done. But now, at the end of each visit, Thomas would gather the kids and tell them about James Jordan, about a man who saw greatness in his son before anyone else did. The media ate it up. Stories about the man in the gray jacket appeared in newspapers and magazines. Thomas Whitmore became a symbol of loyalty, of promises kept, of honoring those we've lost. But for Michael, Thomas was something more personal. He was a living connection to his father, a bridge between past and present, a reminder that James Jordan's influence hadn't ended with his death, it had just taken on a different form. One evening, Michael and Thomas sat in Michael's home office, working on plans for the James Jordan Foundation. Papers were spread across the desk, budget proposals, program ideas, location possibilities. "What do you think my father would want this foundation to focus on?" Michael asked. Thomas thought for a long moment. "Your father believed that everyone deserves a chance. He didn't just help me. I saw him help lots of people over the years. People who were struggling, who needed someone to believe in them. He'd want this foundation to give kids opportunities they might not otherwise have." Michael nodded, writing notes. "Basketball programs for underprivileged kids, that's the core." "But not just basketball," Thomas added. "Your father's letter talked about character, about being a good person. The foundation should teach both, how to play basketball and how to be someone worth being." "Education too," Michael said. "Scholarships, tutoring, help with college applications. Basketball can open doors, but education keeps them open." They worked late into the night, building something that would honor James Jordan's memory, something that would help kids the way James had helped Thomas, something that would teach what really mattered. Around midnight, Juanita brought them coffee. She looked at the plans spread across the desk and smiled. "James would be so proud of both of you." "I hope so," Michael said. "I want to get this right. I want it to be what he would have wanted." "It will be," Thomas said with certainty, "because you're doing it for the right reasons, not for publicity or tax breaks or to make yourself look good. You're doing it because you loved your father and you want to honor him. That intention will guide everything else." A week later, Michael received a package at his home, no return address. Inside was a newspaper clipping from the Wilmington Morning Star, dated June 20, 1996, just a few days earlier. The headline read, "Local hero James Jordan remembered through Son's Foundation." The article talked about the press conference, about Thomas Whitmore's story, about the foundation Michael was starting. But what caught Michael's attention was a letter to the editor printed alongside the article. "Dear editor, I read with great interest about the James Jordan Foundation being started by his son Michael. I wanted to share my own story about James Jordan. In 1985, my son was diagnosed with leukemia. Our insurance didn't cover all the treatment, and we were drowning in medical bills. We were going to lose our house. James Jordan worked at the same factory as my husband. When he heard about our situation, he organized a fundraiser among the factory workers. They raised enough money to keep us in our house and help with the medical bills. James never wanted recognition. He never told anyone outside the factory what he'd done. He just said, 'We take care of our own.' My son survived the leukemia. He's 23 now, healthy and strong. Every good day I have with him, I think about James Jordan and what he did for our family. When I heard he was murdered in 1993, I cried for days. The world lost a truly good man, but I'm grateful his son is keeping his spirit alive through this foundation. Thank you, Michael Jordan, for reminding us what your father taught you. And thank you, Thomas Whitmore, for keeping your promise. Sincerely, Margaret Chen, Wilmington, NC." Michael read the letter 3 times. Then he called Thomas. "Did you see the article from Wilmington?" Michael asked. "I did. I've gotten 5 phone calls today from people in North Carolina who have similar stories about your father, people he helped over the years, people who want to contribute to the foundation." Michael felt overwhelmed with emotion. I never knew he was helping so many people." "That's because he didn't do it for recognition," Thomas said. "He did it because it was right. That's who he was." "That's who I want to be," Michael said quietly. "You already are," Thomas replied. "Why do you think your father was so proud of you?" By the end of June, the James Jordan Foundation was officially established. The first program would launch in Chicago, providing basketball instruction and academic tutoring to kids in low-income neighborhoods. But it would also include character education, lessons about kindness, integrity, perseverance, and treating others with respect. Thomas agreed to be the program director, working full-time to build something that honored the man who had saved his life. At the foundation's opening ceremony, Michael gave a speech to a room full of donors, community leaders, and families who would benefit from the programs. "My father taught me that greatness isn't about being better than other people," Michael said. "It's about being better than you were yesterday. It's about using whatever gifts you have to lift others up." That's what this foundation will do. It will give kids the tools to be great, not at basketball necessarily, but at life. He looked at Thomas, who stood in the front row. "And it will be guided by someone who understands what my father believed, someone who has spent 25 years keeping a promise, someone who shows us every day what loyalty and honor look like." The audience applauded, but Thomas just smiled and nodded at Michael. A silent communication between two men bound by love for the same person. After the ceremony, Michael found Thomas standing outside, looking up at the Chicago sky. "You okay?" Michael asked. "I'm good," Thomas said. "Just thinking about your father, wishing he could see this." "I think he can," Michael said. "Somehow I think he knows." Thomas pulled out his leather notebook. "I wrote something today. Want to hear it?" "Always." Thomas opened to the most recent page and read. June 30, 1996, Michael officially opened the James Jordan Foundation today. In the audience were 50 kids who will be part of the first program. They don't know it yet, but their lives are about to change. Not because of basketball, but because someone believes in them. The same way James believed in me. The same way James believed in Michael. The promise isn't just kept anymore, it's growing. It's spreading. James Jordan's kindness is multiplying. And that's the greatest legacy anyone could leave. Michael felt tears streaming down his face. "That's beautiful." "It's true," Thomas said, closing the notebook. "Your father planted seeds of kindness everywhere he went. Now those seeds are growing into something bigger than he ever imagined." They stood together in comfortable silence, two men who had been brought together by tragedy but bound together by love. Michael had lost his father, but he'd gained something too, a deeper understanding of what it meant to honor someone's memory, to live in a way that would make them proud. "Come on," Michael said, putting his arm around Thomas's shoulders. "Let's go inside. Those kids want to meet us, and I promised them we'd play some basketball." "Just like your father would have done," Thomas said with a smile. "Just like he taught me to do," Michael replied. They walked back into the building together, ready to begin the work that would carry James Jordan's legacy forward. Ready to keep the promise not just to one man, but to all the kids who needed someone to believe in them. The man in the gray jacket was no longer a mystery or a shadow. He was family. He was a friend. He was a keeper of promises and a guardian of memory. And most importantly, he was a reminder that the people we love never truly leave us. They live on in the lessons they taught us, in the love they showed us, and in the work we do to honor them. Michael Jordan had won 4 championships, but the real victory was understanding what his father had tried to teach him all along. Greatness isn't measured in trophies. It's measured in the lives you touch and the kindness you spread. And by that measure, both James Jordan and his son were already champions. Summer turned to fall and Michael prepared for another NBA season. The Bulls were hungry for their 5th championship. Practice was intense. The competition was fierce, but something had changed in Michael. He played with the same intensity, but there was a lightness to him now, a peace he hadn't felt in years. Thomas came to every home game, sitting in section 108, row 12, seat 6. But now, fans knew who he was. They'd wave to him, thank him for his service, tell him they'd read about his promise to James Jordan. Thomas had become a beloved figure at the United Center. But as September approached, Michael noticed something in Thomas, a heaviness that hadn't been there before. During their weekly meetings for the foundation, Thomas would sometimes stare into space, his mind clearly somewhere else. "What's wrong?" Michael asked one afternoon in his office. Thomas looked up, startled. "Nothing, I'm fine." "Don't lie to me," Michael said gently. "I know you well enough now to see when something's bothering you." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "There's something else, something your father told me. Something I haven't shared with you yet." Michael felt his stomach tighten. "About the letter. About what happened before he died." Thomas's hands were shaking. "Your father made me promise not to tell you until you were ready, until the foundation was established, until you'd found peace. He said you'd need to be strong for this part." Michael sat down slowly. "What are you talking about?" Thomas pulled out his leather notebook and opened it to a page near the middle. Unlike the other pages filled with neat handwriting, this page had just a few lines, dated July 20, 1993, 3 days before James Jordan was murdered. "Your father called me that day," Thomas said. "He was scared, really scared. He told me things I've carried for 3 years, waiting for the right time to tell you." Michael's heart was pounding. "Tell me now." Thomas took a deep breath. Your father had been receiving threatening phone calls for about 2 weeks. Someone was demanding money from him, $10,000. What? Michael leaned forward. Why would someone demand money from my father? He wasn't wealthy. I was, but he. That was exactly the problem, Thomas interrupted. The people calling him thought because you were rich, your father must have access to money. They knew he was your father. They were using that against him. Michael felt cold all over. Who were they? He didn't know. The calls came from pay phones, different locations each time, but they knew details about his life. Where he worked, what car he drove, where your mother shopped. They'd been watching him. Did he go to the police? Thomas shook his head. He was afraid. They told him if he went to the police, they'd hurt your mother or your children. He couldn't risk it. Michael stood up, pacing the room. So what did he do? He tried to gather the money. He was going to pay them. He didn't tell your mother. He didn't want to scare her. But he told me because he needed someone to know, in case something went wrong. Thomas's voice broke. He said, if anything happens to me, someone needs to make sure Michael knows I didn't do anything wrong. I wasn't involved in gambling or drugs or anything bad. I was just trying to protect my family. Michael's vision blurred with tears. All these years there had been rumors, whispers about gambling debts, about James Jordan being involved in something shady. Michael had defended his father, but the rumors had hurt. They'd tainted his father's memory. Why didn't you tell me this 3 years ago? Michael demanded. Why didn't you go to the police? Because your father made me promise not to, Thomas said, tears streaming down his face. He said, if these people kill me, they'll still be out there. They might come after Michael or the family. The police won't be able to protect everyone all the time. So don't tell anyone until enough time has passed that they've moved on to other targets. Until Michael is strong enough to hear the truth without doing something that might put himself in danger. Michael sank back into his chair. His father had been murdered trying to protect his family. He hadn't been involved in anything wrong. He'd been a victim, not a participant. The 2 men who killed him, Michael said slowly, were they the ones who'd been threatening him? I don't know, Thomas admitted. The police said it was a random robbery, but the timing was too convenient. 3 days after your father told me about the threats, he was dead. I've always wondered if it was connected. You should have told the police, Michael said, anger rising in his voice. You should have told someone. Maybe they could have caught the people behind it. Your father made me swear, Thomas said firmly. He said, promise me, Thomas, don't tell anyone until enough time has passed, until my family is safe, until Michael has healed enough to handle the truth. I kept that promise because I owed him my life, even if it meant carrying this burden alone. Michael put his head in his hands. Everything he thought he knew about his father's death was shifting. The randomness of it that had been the hardest part. The senseless violence of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. But this was worse. This was targeted. This was people hunting his father because of Michael's fame and wealth. It's my fault, Michael whispered. He died because of me. No, Thomas said sharply. Don't you dare think that. Your father never blamed you, not for 1 second. He was proud of you. The last thing he said to me was, make sure Michael knows this wasn't his fault. Make sure he knows I'd do it all again. Be his father, support his dreams, take whatever risk necessary, because being Michael Jordan's dad was the greatest honor of my life. Michael broke down completely. Sobs racked his body. All the guilt he'd carried for 3 years, wondering if his retirement was enough, wondering if he'd honored his father's memory properly, wondering if he could have prevented the death somehow. It all came pouring out. Thomas moved around the desk and put his arms around Michael, letting him cry. 2 men bound by grief and love for the same person, finally sharing the whole truth. When Michael finally composed himself, he had questions. So many questions. Did my mother know about the threats? No, your father specifically didn't tell her. He was protecting her. Did he have the $10,000? Was he going to pay them? He'd managed to gather $8,000. He was going to try to negotiate for the rest. The meeting was supposed to happen the day after he died. Michael felt sick. His father had died with $8,000 he'd been gathering to pay off criminals, money meant to save his family. Where's the money now? Michael asked. The police found it in his car. They assumed it was gambling winnings which fed the rumors, but your mother got it back. She probably has no idea what it was really for." Michael stood and walked to the window. Chicago spread out below him, the city where he'd built his legend, earned his fortune, become famous. The same fame that had made his father a target. "I need to know if the two men who killed him were connected to the threats," Michael said. "I need to know if they were random thieves or if they were hired to kill him." Thomas nodded. "I understand. But Michael, your father's warning still stands. If there are other people involved, people who were never caught, digging into this could put you or your family at risk." "I don't care," Michael said, but even as he said it, he thought about Jeffrey, Marcus, and Jasmine, about Juanita, about his mother. "Actually, I do care, but I can't just let this go." "Your father knew you'd feel that way," Thomas said quietly. "That's another reason he asked me to wait," he said. "Michael has to know the truth eventually, but wait until he's not consumed by grief. Wait until he's thinking clearly. Wait until he has people around him who can help him make smart decisions, not emotional ones." Michael turned back to face Thomas. "Do you think the people who threatened him are still out there?" "I don't know. It's been 3 years. They might be in prison for other crimes. They might have moved on. They might have forgotten all about James Jordan. Or," Thomas trailed off, "or they might still be watching," Michael finished, "waiting to see if I have information they want." The room was silent except for the hum of traffic outside. "There's something else," Thomas said reluctantly. "Your father asked me to tell you something specific. He said, tell Michael to be careful who he trusts. Tell him that not everyone who seems like a friend has his best interests at heart. Tell him to protect his money, his family, and his reputation, because there are always people who will try to take advantage." Michael thought about all the people in his life. Teammates, coaches, business associates, friends. Were some of them not what they seemed? Had his father sensed something specific? "Did he name anyone?" Michael asked. "Did he say who I should watch out for?" "No, he just said to be careful, to trust your instincts, to remember that fame attracts all kinds of people and not all of them have good intentions." Michael sat back down, processing everything. His father had known danger was close, had tried to handle it alone, had died trying to protect his family, and even in his final days, he'd been thinking about Michael's future, about protecting him from threats he might not see coming. "Why are you telling me this now?" Michael asked. "Why not wait longer?" Thomas looked at him with sad, wise eyes. "Because you're ready now, because you've built something good with the foundation, because you've found peace with his death and now you can handle knowing the whole truth without letting it destroy you. And because," he hesitated. "Because what?" "Because I've seen someone watching you lately. At games, at foundation events. Someone who doesn't fit. Someone who reminded me of the way those phone calls made your father feel. I might be paranoid. It might be nothing. But I promised your father I'd watch over you. And part of that means telling you when I think you might be in danger." Michael's blood ran cold. What did they look like? Different people, different times. But they all have the same look, like they're studying you, not enjoying the game or the event, like they're looking for something. Maybe I'm seeing ghosts. Maybe losing your father made me overly cautious, but I had to tell you. I had to warn you. Michael thought about the security he already had, the guards at his house, the protection at games and public events. But his father had been murdered at a rest stop on a highway. No security could prevent everything. "What should I do?" Michael asked. "Be careful," Thomas said simply. "Tell your security team to be extra vigilant. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't trust strangers who approach you with unusual requests or opportunities. And most importantly, make sure your family is protected." Michael nodded slowly. "I'll do all of that, but I also need to decide whether to investigate further, to try to find out if my father's murder was random or planned." "That's your choice," Thomas said. "Your father left that decision to you. He just wanted you to have all the information first, to understand what you might be getting into." They sat in silence for a long time, the weight of the conversation settling over them like a heavy blanket. Finally, Michael spoke. "Thank you for telling me. I know it wasn't easy to carry this secret for 3 years." "It was the hardest thing I've ever done," Thomas admitted. There were so many times I wanted to tell you, to give you closure, to help you understand, but I'd made a promise, and promises to James Jordan are sacred. Michael stood and walked over to Thomas. He pulled the older man into a tight embrace. "You're a good man, Thomas Whitmore. My father chose well when he trusted you." "I hope so," Thomas said, his voice muffled against Michael's shoulder. "I hope I've done right by him, by you." "You have," Michael said firmly. "And whatever happens next, whatever I decide to do about this information, I want you to know that you kept your promise. You watched over me. You protected me by waiting until I was ready. My father would be grateful." When they finally pulled apart, both men's faces were wet with tears. "What are you going to do?" Thomas asked. Michael looked out the window at the city again, at the life he'd built, the family he loved, the legacy he was creating. Then he thought about his father, alone and scared, gathering money to pay off criminals, dying on a highway trying to protect the people he loved. "I don't know yet," Michael said honestly, "but I know I can't let this go. My father deserves justice. He deserves for the truth to be known, that he wasn't involved in anything shady, that he was trying to protect his family. Even if I can't find the people who threatened him, I can clear his name." "Just be careful," Thomas pleaded. "Your father's greatest wish was for you to be safe and happy. Don't risk everything he died protecting just to avenge his death." "I won't," Michael promised, "but I won't hide from the truth either. That's not how my father raised me." Thomas nodded, understanding. James Jordan had raised a fighter, someone who faced challenges head-on, someone who didn't back down from hard things. "Then whatever you decide," Thomas said, "I'm with you. Just like I promised your father, I'll watch over you. I'll help however I can." Michael smiled through his tears. "I know you will. That's what family does." Outside, the Chicago sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Another day ending, another night beginning. But for Michael Jordan, this felt like a beginning of a different kind. The beginning of understanding. The beginning of truth. The beginning of deciding how to honor his father's memory, not just with a foundation, but with justice. His father had died protecting him. Now Michael had to figure out how to live in a way that honored that sacrifice. And he had to do it carefully, wisely, protecting the family his father had died trying to save. The man in the gray jacket had delivered the final message. Now Michael had to decide what to do with it. The championship rings on his fingers suddenly felt less important than the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. But that was okay, because Michael Jordan had never backed down from a challenge, and he wasn't about to start now. Michael didn't sleep that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind racing through everything Thomas had told him. His father had been threatened. He'd been gathering money to pay criminals. He'd been trying to protect his family right up until the moment he was killed. And Michael hadn't known. For 3 years, he'd grieved without understanding the full truth. Around 3 in the morning, he got out of bed quietly so he wouldn't wake Juanita. He went downstairs to his office and pulled out a box he hadn't opened since 1993. Inside were newspaper clippings about his father's murder, police reports, court documents from the trial of the 2 men convicted of killing James Jordan, Daniel Green and Larry Demery. Those were the names of his father's killers. They'd been sentenced to life in prison. The police had said it was a random robbery. James Jordan had been sleeping in his car at a rest stop, and the 2 men had approached, seen the expensive car, and shot him to steal it. But what if it wasn't random? What if Green and Demery had been hired? What if they were just the trigger men for someone else? Michael spread the documents across his desk. He read through the trial transcripts, looking for anything he might have missed 3 years ago. Anything that might connect to the phone threats Thomas had described. Nothing jumped out. The prosecutors had presented it as an opportunistic crime. 2 criminals saw an expensive car and made a deadly decision. There was no mention of anyone hiring them. No mention of phone threats or demands for money. But that didn't mean it wasn't true. It just meant no one had been looking for that connection. Michael picked up his phone. He needed help, professional help. He needed someone who could investigate without putting his family at risk. But who could he trust? His father's warning echoed in his mind. Not everyone who seems like a friend has your best interests at heart. The next morning, Michael called his lawyer, David Falk. They met at a restaurant far from downtown, away from prying eyes and cameras. "I need your help with something sensitive," Michael said after they'd ordered. Something about my father's death. David's face grew serious. What's going on, Michael? Michael told him everything about Thomas's revelation, about the phone threats, about the money his father had been gathering, about his suspicion that the murder might not have been random. David listened without interrupting, his lawyer's mind processing the information. You want to investigate, David said when Michael finished. You want to find out if there's more to the story. Yes, but I need to do it quietly. I can't have the media finding out and turning this into a circus, and I need to make sure my family stays safe. David nodded slowly. I know someone, a private investigator who specializes in cold cases, former FBI, discreet and thorough. I've used him before for sensitive matters. Can we trust him? As much as you can trust anyone in this situation, David said honestly. But Michael, you need to understand something. If your father was threatened by people who were never caught, and if those people find out you're investigating, you could be putting yourself and your family in danger. Are you sure you want to do this? Michael thought about his father's letter, about excellence being who you are when nobody's watching, about greatness being measured in how you treat people, not in championships. His father had spent his last weeks trying to protect his family, even at the cost of his own life. How could Michael do any less? I'm sure, Michael said. My father deserves the truth, and his memory deserves to be cleared of all the rumors and speculation. Even if it's dangerous, it's the right thing to do. David pulled out a business card and wrote a name and number on the back. His name is Robert Chen. Tell him I sent you. Tell him everything you told me. And Michael, be prepared for whatever he finds. The truth isn't always comfortable. I know, Michael said, pocketing the card. But I'd rather live with an uncomfortable truth than a comfortable lie. 2 days later, Michael met Robert Chen at a small office building on the outskirts of Chicago. Chen was in his 50s, Asian American, with sharp eyes that seemed to see everything. His office was spare and professional. A desk, some filing cabinets, a wall of certifications and commendations from his FBI days. David Falk says you need help with a cold case, Chen said after they shook hands. Your father's murder. Yes. Michael sat down and went through the story again, the threats, the money, the timing, his suspicions about the 2 convicted killers. Chen took notes on a yellow legal pad, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When Michael finished, Chen sat back and studied him. You understand this is a long shot, Chen said bluntly. It's been 3 years, memories fade, evidence disappears, people die or move away. And if there really was a bigger conspiracy, the people behind it have had 3 years to cover their tracks. I understand, but I need to try. Chen nodded. Then here's what I'll do. I'll start by reviewing the original police investigation. I'll interview the detectives who worked the case, see if anything stood out that didn't make it into the reports. I'll look at Green and Demery's backgrounds, who their associates were, whether they had any connection to organized crime or professional criminals. What about the phone threats? Michael asked. Can you trace those? After 3 years, unlikely. But I can check phone records from your father's home and workplace, see if there were any unusual patterns. Calls from pay phones, calls at odd hours, anything that stands out. Michael felt a glimmer of hope. How long will this take? Weeks, maybe months. Investigation like this is slow work, but I'll keep you updated every step of the way. And Michael, I need you to promise me something. What? Don't investigate on your own. Don't go talking to people connected to the case. Don't try to track down Green and Demery in prison. Let me do my job. Because if you start poking around and if there really are dangerous people involved, you'll make yourself a target. Michael wanted to argue to say he could handle himself, but he thought about Juanita, about his children, about his mother. He thought about what his father had died trying to protect. I promise, he said. I'll stay out of it, but you have to promise to tell me everything you find, good or bad. I need to know the truth. You have my word, Chen said. They shook hands again, and Michael left feeling like he'd set something important in motion, like wheels were turning that would eventually lead to answers. He just hoped he was ready for whatever those answers turned out to be. While Chen investigated, Michael tried to focus on basketball. The 1996-97 season was underway, and the Bulls were playing at an elite level. But Michael's mind kept drifting back to his father, to the threats, to the unanswered questions. Thomas noticed. After a game in early November, he pulled Michael aside. "You hired someone to investigate," Thomas said. "It wasn't a question. How did you know?" "Because I know you, Michael Jordan. You're not someone who sits and waits. You take action. And I've seen the look on your face lately, the same look you had before you made your comeback to basketball. The look that says you've made a decision and nothing's going to stop you." Michael sighed. "His name is Robert Chen. He's a former FBI agent. He's looking into whether my father's murder was really random or if it was connected to the threats." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Your father wouldn't want you putting yourself at risk." "My father spent his last weeks gathering money to pay off criminals to protect me and my family. The least I can do is find out if his sacrifice led to justice, or if the people who threatened him are still out there." "And if they are," Thomas asked, "what then?" Michael didn't have an answer for that. He hadn't thought that far ahead. He just knew he needed to know the truth. "Your father asked me to watch over you," Thomas said. "That means I'm involved in this too. Whatever happens, whatever you find out, I'm here. You're not alone in this." Michael felt gratitude wash over him. "Thank you. That means more than you know." "Your father saved my life," Thomas said simply. "Now I get to help save yours if it comes to that. It's an honor." 2 weeks before Christmas, Robert Chen called. "I need to meet with you. I've found something." They met at Chen's office that evening. Michael's hands were sweating as he sat down. This was it. Whatever Chen had discovered would either confirm his suspicions or put them to rest forever. Chen opened a folder and pulled out several documents. "I've been thorough," he said. "I've reviewed the police files, interviewed the original detectives, looked into Green and Demery's backgrounds, examined phone records, and I've found some interesting things." Michael leaned forward. "Tell me." "First, the phone records. Your father received 17 calls from pay phones in the 2 weeks before his death, all from different locations around North Carolina, all lasting less than 2 minutes. That's consistent with threatening phone calls, short, anonymous, untraceable." Michael's heart raced. So Thomas was telling the truth. The threats were real. "It appears so. Second, I looked into Green and Demery. They were small-time criminals with records for burglary and drug possession, but neither had any history of violent crime before murdering your father. That's unusual. Most violent criminals escalate gradually. These two went from petty theft to murder with no warning." "What does that mean?" "It could mean they saw an opportunity and took it. Or it could mean someone encouraged them. Someone told them your father would be an easy target, that he'd have valuables worth stealing. I can't prove that yet, but it's suspicious." Chen pulled out another document. "Third, and this is where it gets interesting, I interviewed a former cellmate of Daniel Green. The guy was released last year and agreed to talk to me. He says Green once got drunk and said something strange. He said the shooting wasn't supposed to happen, that they were only supposed to scare James Jordan and take the car. But something went wrong and Demery panicked and shot him." Michael felt like he'd been punched in the gut. Supposed to scare him. Why? Green didn't elaborate. He sobered up and refused to talk about it anymore. But it suggests there might have been a plan beyond simple robbery. Maybe someone wanted your father scared off, wanted to send a message. "A message to who?" "To me." Chen shrugged. "Maybe, or maybe to your father specifically. Maybe someone thought he knew something or had something they wanted. Without more evidence, I can't say for sure." Michael stood up and paced the small office. "So what you're telling me is that my father's murder might not have been random, that there might have been people behind Green and Demery who wanted to scare my father, and it escalated to murder." "That's one possibility," Chen said carefully. "But I want to be clear, I don't have hard proof. What I have is circumstantial evidence that suggests there might be more to the story. The phone calls, the pattern of threats, Green's cryptic comment to his cellmate. It all points towards something bigger, but it's not enough to reopen the case or get the police involved." "What about the people who made the threats?" Michael asked. "Can you find them?" "I've hit dead ends there. The calls were from pay phones, no way to trace them, no physical evidence, no witnesses. Whoever was threatening your father covered their tracks well." Michael sat back down, feeling defeated. So what you're saying is we'll never know for sure. Not never, Chen said. There's one more avenue I can explore. I can try to talk to Green and Demery directly, see if either of them will tell me what really happened. But that's risky. If there are other people involved, people who are still out there, approaching Green and Demery might tip them off that someone's investigating. Michael thought about his father's warning, about being careful, about protecting his family. But he also thought about his father's sacrifice, about James Jordan spending his last days terrified, gathering money, trying to protect the people he loved. Talk to them, Michael said. Talk to Green and Demery. Find out what they know, but be careful. Don't let anyone know I'm the one asking questions. Chen nodded. I'll handle it. Give me a few weeks. Prison interviews take time to arrange. After Michael left Chen's office, he sat in his car for a long time, not starting the engine. Everything was becoming clearer and more complicated at the same time. The threats were real. The timing was suspicious. There might have been people behind the murder who were never caught. But what could he do about it? Even if he knew for certain that his father's murder wasn't random, even if he knew there was a conspiracy, what would change? Green and Demery were already in prison for life. Justice in a legal sense had been served. But Michael wanted more than legal justice. He wanted to understand. He wanted to know who had threatened his father and why. He wanted to clear his father's name of all the rumors that had swirled for 3 years. And he wanted to make sure those people never threatened anyone else. He started the car and drove home through the Chicago night, the city lights blurring past. Somewhere in the city, Thomas Whitmore was probably in his small apartment, keeping his own vigil, watching over Michael from a distance the way he'd done for 25 years. And somewhere else, maybe in North Carolina, maybe in Chicago, maybe anywhere in the world, there might be people who knew the truth about James Jordan's death. People who had made those threatening phone calls. People who had sent Green and Demery to that rest stop. People who thought they'd gotten away with it. Michael gripped the steering wheel tighter. He wasn't going to let them get away with it. His father had taught him never to give up, never to accept defeat, always to fight for what was right. This was his fight now, not on a basketball court where he'd already proven himself countless times, but in the real world where the stakes were higher than any championship. His father had died protecting him. Now Michael would honor that sacrifice by finding the truth, no matter how long it took. No matter what he had to do, the man in the gray jacket had delivered the message. Now Michael had to decide what to do with it. And Michael Jordan had never been someone who walked away from a challenge, not when it came to basketball, and certainly not when it came to his father. Christmas came and went. Michael played basketball, spent time with his family, and waited. Every day, he checked his phone hoping for a call from Robert Chen. Every night, he thought about his father and the unanswered questions that haunted him. The Bulls were having another incredible season. They were on track to win 70 games, something almost impossible in the NBA. Michael was playing at the peak of his powers, averaging over 30 points per game. But inside, he felt incomplete, like he was waiting for something to finish before he could truly rest. In late January, Chen finally called. I got approval to interview Daniel Green. I'm going to the prison next week. Do you want to come with me? Michael's first instinct was to say yes, to look Green in the eye and demand answers about his father's death. But then he remembered Chen's warning. If there were other people involved, Michael showing up at the prison would signal that he was investigating. No, Michael said reluctantly. You go, but call me the moment you're done. I want to know everything. Understood, Chen said. I'll be in touch. The week crawled by. Michael practiced with his teammates, played games, smiled for cameras. But his mind was hundreds of miles away in a North Carolina prison where a man who had killed his father was about to answer questions. Finally, on a Tuesday evening, Chen called. I talked to Green. We need to meet, tonight if possible. Michael's heart raced. I'll be there in an hour. Chen's office was dark except for the desk lamp when Michael arrived. The investigator looked tired, like he'd been carrying something heavy all day. Tell me, Michael said before he even sat down. Chen opened his notebook. Daniel Green agreed to talk to me. At first, he stuck to the story from the trial that he and Demery saw your father's car, thought it looked expensive, and decided to rob him. But I pressed him. I told him I knew about the phone calls to your father. I told him I knew someone had been threatening James Jordan for weeks before the murder. What did he say? He got quiet. Then he asked me who I was working for. I told him I was working for a family member who wanted the truth. He thought about that for a long time. Then he said something I didn't expect. He said, "I've been waiting for someone to ask the right questions for 3 years." Michael leaned forward, hardly breathing. "Green told me the truth," Chen continued. "Or at least his version of it. He said 2 weeks before the murder, a man approached him and Demery at a bar. This man knew they were small-time criminals looking for bigger scores. He offered them $5,000 for a simple job: follow James Jordan, wait until he was alone and scare him. Take his car, take his wallet, but make sure he understood that the people who'd been calling him weren't playing around." Michael felt sick. So it wasn't random, someone hired them. According to Green, yes, but here's where it gets complicated. Green says the plan was never to kill your father. They were supposed to scare him and take the car. But when they approached your father at the rest stop, Demery panicked. Your father woke up and reached for something, maybe his phone, maybe just to defend himself. Demery thought it was a weapon and shot him. Michael's hands clenched into fists. His father had died because a criminal panicked, because a plan to scare him had gone horribly wrong. Did Green identify the man who hired them? Michael asked, his voice barely controlled. No, he said the man paid in cash and used a fake name. But he described him: white male, 50s, expensive suit, spoke with authority like he was used to giving orders. Green said he seemed connected, like he worked for someone important. Connected to what? The mob, a criminal organization. Chen shook his head. Green didn't know. The man never said who he was working for or why they wanted James Jordan scared. He just paid them half the money up front and promised the rest after the job was done. Did they ever get the rest of the money? No, after your father died, the man disappeared. Green and Demery never heard from him again. That's when they realized they'd been set up. They'd been paid to scare someone, but they'd ended up committing murder. And whoever hired them had walked away clean, leaving them holding the bag. Michael stood up and walked to the window. Outside, Chicago was cold and dark. Somewhere in this city, or maybe somewhere else entirely, was a man who had hired 2 criminals to threaten his father. A man who had set in motion the events that led to James Jordan's death. Why? Michael asked. Why would anyone want to scare my father? What could he possibly have that someone wanted? That's the question I can't answer, Chen admitted. Your father wasn't wealthy. He didn't have valuable information about you or your career, at least nothing that wasn't publicly available. He wasn't involved in anything illegal. By all accounts, he was just a regular man who happened to be Michael Jordan's father. Then why target him? Chen pulled out another document. I have a theory, but it's just speculation. Based on what Thomas told you about the phone calls, the people threatening your father wanted $10,000. That's a specific amount, not $1 million, not 100,000, but 10,000 exactly. So maybe they weren't really after money. Maybe the money was just an excuse to make contact, to establish control. Maybe the real goal was to scare James Jordan into doing something or not doing something. And when he didn't cooperate, they escalated. Michael turned back to face Chen. What could my father possibly have done or not done that would make someone want to threaten him? I don't know, but I think the answer is in the timing. The threat started in late June 1993. Do you remember anything significant happening around that time? Anyone new in your father's life? Any business deals or decisions he was involved in? Michael thought back. June 1993. The Bulls had just won their 3rd straight championship. Michael had been at the peak of his fame. His father had been proud, supportive, the same as always. Then something clicked in Michael's memory. Wait, in June 1993, my father was approached by someone about a business opportunity, something involving a sports memorabilia company. He called me to ask if I thought it was legitimate. Chen's eyes sharpened. What did you tell him? I told him to be careful, that a lot of people were trying to cash in on my name. I said he shouldn't get involved unless everything was legally documented and properly vetted. And what did he decide? He turned it down. He said it didn't feel right, that the people involved seemed more interested in using the Jordan name than in building a real business. Chen was writing quickly in his notebook. Do you remember the name of the company or the people who approached him? Michael shook his head. It was 3 years ago, and I didn't pay much attention. My father got approached with stuff like that all the time. I just told him to be careful and trust his instincts. This could be it, Chen said excitedly. This could be why they targeted him. Maybe when your father turned down this business opportunity, he upset someone. Someone who'd invested money or made promises based on the assumption that they'd have access to the Jordan name. When your father said no, they tried to intimidate him into changing his mind. By threatening to hurt my family. By threatening to hurt what mattered most to him, you and your family. They probably thought if they scared him enough, he'd give in. But James Jordan wasn't the type to be intimidated, was he? Michael felt tears sting his eyes. No, he wasn't. He'd face down anything if he thought it was the right thing to do. So he refused to cooperate, and they sent Green and Demery to escalate the pressure. But it went wrong, and your father ended up dead. Michael sank back into his chair, overwhelmed by the implications. His father had died because he'd been trying to protect Michael's reputation, because he'd refused to let someone exploit the Jordan name for profit, because he'd stood up to people who were trying to intimidate him. Can you find these people? Michael asked. The ones behind the memorabilia company. I can try, Chen said, but it won't be easy. If Green is telling the truth about being set up, then these people are smart and connected. They covered their tracks well. It might take months, maybe longer. I don't care how long it takes, Michael said. I need to know who they are. I need them to face justice for what they did. Chen nodded. I'll keep investigating. But Michael, you need to understand something. Even if I find out who was behind this, we might not be able to prove it in court. It's been 3 years. Evidence is gone. Witnesses have scattered. The man who hired Green might be dead or might deny everything. We might find the truth but never get legal justice. Then what good is the truth? Michael asked bitterly. Because you'll know, Chen said simply. You'll know your father died with honor, protecting what he believed in. You'll know he wasn't involved in anything wrong. You'll know the rumors were false. And you can tell the world his real story. That's worth something, isn't it? Michael thought about his father's letter, about how James had wanted to make sure Michael remembered what really mattered. Not championships or fame, but character and integrity. His father had died with both, and now Michael had a chance to make sure the world knew it. Keep investigating, Michael said. Find out who was behind the memorabilia company. Find out who hired Green and Demery. Even if we can't bring them to justice in court, I want to know their names. I want to look them in the eye and tell them I know what they did. That could be dangerous, Chen warned. I don't care. My father faced danger to protect me. I can face danger to honor him. The next several weeks were torture. Chen investigated while Michael played basketball. The Bulls continued their historic season, winning game after game, but every victory felt hollow. Michael was going through the motions, playing brilliantly but feeling empty inside. Thomas noticed. After a game in early March, he pulled Michael aside. Something's changed, Thomas said. You're not yourself lately. Michael told him about Green's confession, about the memorabilia company, about Chen's investigation. Thomas listened with growing concern. Your father wouldn't want you putting yourself at risk over this, Thomas said. My father put himself at risk for me, Michael countered. He died protecting what mattered. How can I do any less? Thomas was quiet for a long moment. Then I'm coming with you. When you confront these people, if Chen finds them, I'm going to be there. Your father asked me to watch over you. That means I stand beside you when things get dangerous. Michael felt a wave of gratitude. You don't have to. Yes, I do, Thomas said firmly. Your father saved my life. You've given my life meaning. I'm not letting either of you down now. They stood together in the empty hallway, two men bound by love for James Jordan, two men determined to honor his memory whatever the cost. Thank you, Michael said quietly. Don't thank me yet, Thomas replied. We don't know what we're walking into. In late April, with the regular season nearly over, Chen called again. I found them, the people behind the memorabilia company, and you're not going to believe who they are. Michael met Chen at his office that evening. Thomas came with him, sitting quietly while Chen laid out what he'd discovered. The memorabilia company was called Jordan Legacy Collectibles, Chen explained. On paper, it looked legitimate, proper incorporation, business licenses, the works. But when I dug deeper, I found connections to a man named Vincent Russo. He's a businessman with ties to organized crime in North Carolina. Not a made man himself, but someone who does business with the wrong people. And he approached my father, Michael asked. Not directly. He used intermediaries, legitimate-seeming business people who made it look like a real opportunity. But when your father said no, Russo took it personally. He'd already told his associates that he had the Jordan name locked up. When it fell through, he lost face and probably lost money. So he decided to threaten my father into cooperating. Chen nodded. That's my theory. The phone threats, the demands for money. It was all pressure tactics to force your father to sign on. When that didn't work, he hired Green and Demery to escalate things. Where is Russo now? Michael's voice was cold. That's the interesting part. He died 2 years ago, heart attack. So if he was behind everything, he's already beyond justice. Michael felt frustration boiling over. So that's it, he's dead and we can't do anything. Not quite, Chen said. I found something else. Russo had a partner in the memorabilia company, a man named Marcus Webb. He's still alive, still in North Carolina, still running business ventures, and I think he knows exactly what happened to your father. Can we talk to him? We can try, but Michael, this is where it gets risky. If Webb was involved in your father's death, confronting him could put you in danger. He might deny everything. He might threaten you. Or worse, he might try to finish what Russo started. Michael looked at Thomas, who nodded. We're doing this, Michael said. Set up a meeting with Webb. I want to look him in the eye and hear what he has to say. Chen sighed. All right, but we do this smart. I'll arrange the meeting in a public place. You'll wear a wire so we have a recording of whatever he says, and you'll have security nearby just in case. When? Michael asked. Give me a week. The Bulls' season will be over by then. You'll have won your 5th championship. Chen smiled slightly. And then we'll go to North Carolina and get answers. Michael nodded. 1 more week, 1 more championship. Then the truth about his father's death would finally come to light. The man in the gray jacket had delivered the message. The investigation had uncovered the conspiracy. Now it was time for the final confrontation. Michael Jordan had spent his life facing challenges on the basketball court, but this challenge was different. This was about justice, about honor, about making sure his father's death meant something. And Michael was ready. He'd been preparing for this moment ever since Thomas Whitmore had first appeared in the crowd. Ever since that shadow in the stands had become family. Ever since his father's letter had reminded him what really mattered. Excellence wasn't just about winning championships. It was about being someone worth being when nobody was watching. And Michael was going to show the world and himself exactly who James Jordan had raised him to be. A champion in basketball and a champion in life. The Bulls won their 5th championship on June 13, 1997. Michael scored 39 points in the final game, playing with an intensity that bordered on anger. Every shot was for his father. Every defensive stop was for the truth he was about to uncover. When the final buzzer sounded, when his teammates mobbed him, when the trophy was placed in his hands, Michael felt no joy, just determination. The basketball part of his life could wait. He had more important work to do. The next morning, Michael Thomas and Robert Chen flew to North Carolina. The meeting with Marcus Webb was set for that afternoon at a restaurant in Wilmington, the same city where Michael had grown up, where his father had taught him basketball, where everything had begun. Chen had arranged everything carefully. The restaurant was public but not too crowded. Michael would wear a recording device hidden under his shirt. Chen would sit at a nearby table listening. 2 security guards would wait outside, ready to intervene if things went wrong. Remember, Chen said as they prepared in the hotel room. Don't accuse him directly. Don't threaten him. Just ask questions and let him talk. If he's guilty, he might reveal something without realizing it. Michael nodded, though his hands were shaking. He'd faced down the toughest defenders in basketball without fear, but this was different. This was his father's killer, or at least the man who had set his father's murder in motion. Thomas put a hand on Michael's shoulder. Your father would be proud of you for seeking the truth, but he'd also want you to be safe. Don't do anything foolish. I won't, Michael promised. I just need to hear him admit it. I need to know for sure. Marcus Webb arrived at the restaurant precisely at 2 o'clock. He was in his late 50s, wearing an expensive suit, carrying himself with the confidence of a successful businessman. He looked nothing like a criminal. He looked like someone who played golf and attended charity dinners. But when he saw Michael, something flickered in his eyes: recognition, and maybe fear. "Mr. Jordan," Webb said, extending his hand. "This is unexpected. When your investigator said someone wanted to discuss business with me, I had no idea it was you." Michael shook his hand, forcing himself to stay calm. "Thank you for meeting with me, Mr. Webb. Please sit down." They sat across from each other at a quiet table in the corner. Webb ordered coffee. Michael ordered water but knew he wouldn't drink it. His mouth was too dry, his stomach too tight. "So," Webb said casually, "what business did you want to discuss?" "Jordan Legacy Collectibles," Michael said, watching Webb's face carefully. "The sports memorabilia company you and Vincent Russo tried to start in 1993. Webb's expression didn't change, but his coffee cup paused halfway to his mouth. "That was a long time ago, ancient history. The venture never got off the ground." "Because my father refused to participate," Michael said. "Your father was cautious, understandably so, but there was no hard feelings. We moved on to other opportunities." Michael leaned forward. "That's not true, is it? There were hard feelings. Vincent Russo had made promises to people based on having access to the Jordan name. When my father said no, Russo lost money, lost face, and he decided to do something about it." Webb's face remained neutral, but Michael saw his jaw tight. "I don't know what you're implying." "In June 1993, my father started receiving threatening phone calls. Someone demanded $10,000. Someone told him his family would be hurt if he didn't cooperate. Do you know anything about that?" "No," Webb's voice was flat. "I don't." 17 phone calls from pay phones, Michael continued, his voice steady despite the anger building inside him. "All in the 2 weeks before my father was murdered. And then 2 small-time criminals named Daniel Green and Larry Demery just happened to find my father at a rest stop and shoot him. Quite a coincidence, don't you think?" Webb set down his coffee cup carefully. "Mr. Jordan, I'm very sorry about your father's death. It was a tragedy, but I had nothing to do with it. And frankly, I find these accusations offensive." "Daniel Green talked to my investigator," Michael said. "He told us someone hired him and Demery, a man in an expensive suit who paid them to scare my father, to make him understand that the people calling him weren't playing around." For the first time, real fear flashed across Webb's face. "Green is a convicted murderer. Why would you believe anything he says?" "Because what he said fits the facts. The phone calls, the timing, the method. Everything points to someone behind the scenes who wanted to pressure my father into cooperating with your business venture." Webb stood up suddenly. "This meeting is over. I came here in good faith and you're accusing me of murder. I had nothing to do with your father's death. Vincent Russo had nothing to do with it. It was a random robbery, nothing more." "Then why are you so nervous?" Michael asked, standing as well. "If you're innocent, why not stay and answer my questions?" "Because I don't have to listen to this." Webb threw money on the table for his coffee. "Your father's death was tragic, but you're looking for someone to blame when the real killers are already in prison. You're wasting your time and mine." He turned to leave, but Michael called after him. "Vincent Russo is dead. He can't be prosecuted, but you're still here, Mr. Webb, and the truth has a way of coming out eventually. If you were involved in my father's death, I will find proof, and when I do, I'll make sure everyone knows what you did." Webb stopped at the door and turned back. His face was red with anger or maybe guilt. "Your father was a stubborn man. He didn't understand how business works. Sometimes you have to make deals, compromise, work with people you might not like. But he thought he was better than everyone else, too good to get his hands dirty." The words hung in the air like poison. "What did you just say?" Michael's voice was dangerously quiet. Webb seemed to realize he'd said too much. "Nothing. Forget it. Stay away from me, Mr. Jordan. Don't contact me again." He walked out quickly, nearly running to his car in the parking lot. Michael stood there, shaking with rage. Thomas appeared at his side, having watched from across the restaurant. "Did you hear that?" Michael asked. "He knew my father. He knew he was stubborn. He knew specifics about his character. "I heard," Thomas said grimly. "That wasn't the statement of an innocent man." Chen joined them, headphones around his neck. "I got it all recorded. His reaction, his knowledge of your father, everything. It's not enough for a criminal prosecution. He didn't actually confess to anything. But it's enough to know you were right. Webb was involved." Michael wanted to chase after Webb to grab him and force a full confession. But he remembered his promise to Chen. Stay calm, stay smart. Don't do anything that would put himself or his family at risk. "What now?" Michael asked. Chen thought for a moment. "Now we go to the police. We show them what we found, the phone records, Green's statement, Webb's reaction today. It might not be enough to arrest Webb, but it's enough to reopen the investigation. To clear your father's name from all the rumors. To show the world that James Jordan wasn't involved in anything shady. He was a victim of people who wanted to exploit your name." "That's it," Michael felt frustrated. "Webb walks away free." "Maybe," Chen admitted. "But Michael, sometimes justice isn't about putting people in prison. Sometimes it's about setting the record straight. Your father's reputation has been questioned for 4 years. Now we can clear it. We can tell the true story. That's worth something." Thomas nodded. "Your father wouldn't want revenge. He'd want the truth to be known. He'd want his name cleared. And he'd want you to move forward with your life, not consumed by anger." Michael knew they were right, but it didn't make it any easier to accept. They spent the rest of the day at the Wilmington police station, presenting everything they'd found to the detectives who had originally investigated James Jordan's murder. The detectives listened carefully, took notes, and promised to look into Marcus Webb's possible connection to the case. "We can't promise anything," the lead detective said. "But if there's more to this story, we'll find it. Your father deserves justice." After they left the police station, Chen flew back to Chicago, but Michael and Thomas stayed in Wilmington. There was one more place Michael needed to visit. They drove to Impai Park as the sun was setting. The basketball court was empty, the chain-link fence casting long shadows across the cracked concrete. This was where it had all started, where James Jordan had watched his son play, where Thomas had first seen the promise in a 10-year-old boy. Michael walked to center court and stood there, remembering. His father's voice calling out corrections, his father's smile when Michael made a good play, his father's hand on his shoulder guiding him, teaching him, loving him. "I know you're watching, Dad," Michael said to the empty court. "I know you see what I'm doing, and I hope you're proud. I hope you know I'm fighting for you the same way you fought for me." Thomas stood at the sideline, silent, letting Michael have this moment. "I found out the truth," Michael continued, his voice breaking. "I know you weren't involved in anything wrong. I know you died protecting me. And I promise I'll make sure the world knows it. I'll make sure your name is honored. I'll make sure the foundation we built in your memory helps kids the same way you helped Thomas, the same way you helped everyone you met." Tears streamed down Michael's face. "I miss you, Dad. I miss you every single day. I wish you were here to see me win championships, to watch your grandchildren grow, to just sit with me and talk about life. But even though you're gone, I feel you. In Thomas, in your letter, in the lessons you taught me. You're still here. You're still guiding me." He looked up at the darkening sky. "I won't let anger consume me. I won't let revenge define me. I'll do what you taught me. I'll be excellent even when nobody's watching. I'll be great not because of trophies, but because of who I am. I'll honor you by living the way you raised me to live." Michael wiped his eyes and turned to Thomas. "Thank you for bringing me here. Thank you for everything you've done." "Your father would be proud of you," Thomas said, his own eyes wet with tears. "Not because you're the greatest basketball player who ever lived, but because you're a good man who happens to be great at basketball. That's what he always wanted for you." They stood together on the court where everything had begun, two men united by love for a third man who had changed both their lives. As darkness fell over Impai Park, Michael felt something shift inside him. The anger was still there, but it was quieter now, controlled. The grief was still there, but it was gentler, more like a sad smile than a sharp pain. He would never forget his father. He would never stop missing him. But he could move forward now knowing the truth. Knowing that James Jordan had died with honor, protecting what he loved. And Michael could live with that. He could build on that. He could use his platform, his fame, his influence to make sure his father's legacy was more than a tragedy. It would be a triumph, a story of integrity, sacrifice, and love that would inspire others. "Let's go home," Michael said to Thomas. They walked off the court together, leaving behind the shadows and stepping toward the light of street lamps illuminating the parking lot. Behind them, Empire Park sat quiet and empty, but it wasn't really empty. It was filled with memories of a father teaching his son, of a man finding hope through basketball, of promises made and kept. The ghost of James Jordan smiled in the shadows, proud of the man his son had become. The man in the gray jacket had delivered the final message. The truth was known. The promise was complete. Now Michael Jordan could truly move forward, carrying his father's legacy not as a burden but as wings. Wings that would lift him higher than any championship ever could. Wings that would carry him toward the future his father had always envisioned. A future where Michael Jordan wasn't just great at basketball, but great at being human. And that was the greatest championship of all. 3 months later, Michael stood in a brand new community center in Chicago. The building was beautiful, bright, clean, with basketball courts, classrooms, and meeting rooms. Above the entrance, carved in stone, were the words, "The James Jordan Foundation Center." Today was the grand opening. Hundreds of people had come, kids from the neighborhood, donors who'd supported the foundation, reporters covering the story, and friends and family who'd known James Jordan. Michael's mother, Dolores, stood beside him, tears in her eyes as she looked at the building named after her husband. His children ran around with other kids, excited about the new courts. Juanita held his hand, proud and supportive as always. And Thomas Whitmore stood near the front, wearing his gray jacket, holding his leather notebook, ready to record this moment like he'd recorded so many others over the past 26 years. "Thank you all for coming," Michael said into the microphone. His voice carried across the crowd. 4 months ago, I stood at another microphone and told you about a promise my father made to Thomas Whitmore, a promise Thomas made to my father. A promise that connected us across decades and eventually brought us here today. The crowd was silent, listening. "Today, I want to tell you about another promise," Michael continued. "A promise I made to my father, even though he's not here to hear it. I promised him I would find the truth about his death. I promised I would clear his name from the rumors and speculation. And I promised I would honor his memory by living the way he raised me to live." Michael looked at Thomas and smiled. "With help from Thomas and from a good investigator, I found the truth. My father wasn't involved in anything wrong. He was threatened by people who wanted to use my name for profit. When he refused, when he stood up for what was right, those people escalated. And ultimately, my father paid the price for his integrity." The crowd murmured. This story had been in the news for weeks since Michael had gone public with what he'd discovered. The police had reopened the investigation into James Jordan's death. Marcus Webb was being questioned, though no charges had been filed yet. But more importantly, James Jordan's name had been cleared. "But I also found something else," Michael said, his voice growing stronger. "I found that my father's death, as tragic as it was, showed us who he really was. He was a man who would face danger to protect his family. A man who wouldn't compromise his values for money or convenience. A man who believed that integrity mattered more than profit." Michael gestured to the building behind him. "This center is built on those values. We're not just teaching kids basketball here. We're teaching them what my father taught me, that excellence is about who you are when nobody's watching. That greatness is measured in how you treat people. That success means being better than you were yesterday, not better than everyone else." He looked out at the crowd, finding faces of kids who would benefit from the programs. "In this building, you'll learn basketball from some of the best coaches in the city. But you'll also learn about character, responsibility, kindness, and perseverance. Because that's what my father believed. That's what he taught me. And that's what I want to teach you." The crowd applauded and Michael stepped back from the microphone. His mother came forward to cut the ribbon, officially opening the center. As the ribbon fell away, children rushed inside, eager to see the courts and try out the new equipment. Michael watched them go, feeling a peace he hadn't felt in years. His father's death would always hurt. The injustice of it would always anger him. But now, that pain and anger had been transformed into something positive. Something that would help thousands of kids over the years. Thomas appeared at his side. "Your father would love this." "I know," Michael said. "I can almost hear him saying, 'That's my boy.'" That's all I ever wanted, to make him proud." "You have," Thomas said firmly. "Not because you won 5 championships, though that's impressive, but because you took tragedy and turned it into hope. You took your father's death and made it mean something. That's real greatness." Later that evening, after the crowds had gone home and the center was quiet, Michael and Thomas sat in the main gymnasium. The polished floor gleamed under the lights. The baskets were regulation height, the lines painted perfectly. "Do you remember the first time you saw me play?" Michael asked. Thomas smiled. "July 1978. You were 10 years old, playing in a summer league tournament. You were so small I wasn't sure which kid was you at first. But then I saw the way you moved, like the ball was part of your hand, like you could see plays before they happened. And I understood why your father was so excited." "What else do you remember?" Thomas opened his leather notebook, the same one he'd been carrying for 26 years. He flipped through pages, reading entries at random. August 2, 1980. Michael stayed after practice to help a younger kid who was struggling with his free throws. Spent 30 minutes working with him, even though he was tired and hungry. James watched from the car, smiling. "I don't remember that," Michael said softly. January 15, 1986. Michael visited Children's Hospital in Chapel Hill. Spent 3 hours there, way longer than scheduled. Made every kid feel special. One little girl told him she wanted to play basketball when she got better. Michael promised to come back and shoot hoops with her. He kept that promise. Thomas turned more pages. June 14, 1991. Michael won his first NBA championship. In the interview after the game, he thanked his father before anyone else. Said everything he'd accomplished was because of James. "James called me that night, crying with pride." Michael felt tears building in his own eyes. "You recorded all of it, every moment that mattered." "That was the promise," Thomas said. "To watch you, to document not just the basketball player but the person, to be a witness to your father's belief in you." He closed the notebook. "And you know what I learned over 26 years? Your father was right. You were great before the championships. You were great when you were 10 years old sharing your basketball. You were great at 18 helping that kid with free throws. You were great at 23 visiting sick children. The championships just showed the world what your father and I already knew." Michael stood up and walked to center court. He picked up a basketball that had been left behind by one of the kids earlier. He dribbled it a few times, the sound echoing in the empty gym. "You know what's funny?" Michael said. "I spent my whole career trying to prove I was the best, trying to win championships, break records, be better than everyone else. And all that time, my father was just hoping I'd be a good person." "You're both," Thomas said. "You're the best basketball player in the world, and you're a good person. Those things aren't mutually exclusive." Michael shot the ball. It arced perfectly through the air and swished through the net. Even alone, even after 5 championships, the sound still made him smile. "I'm retiring," Michael said suddenly. Thomas looked surprised. "What?" "From basketball. After this season, I'm done. I've won 5 championships. I've proven everything I need to prove. And I want to focus on this, on the foundation, on helping kids, on living the life my father would want me to live." "Are you sure?" Thomas asked. "You're still at the top of your game. You could win more championships." "I know, but championships aren't what matter most. My father's letter taught me that. His death taught me that. You taught me that." Michael walked over and sat beside Thomas. "I want to be present for my kids the way my father was present for me. I want to build programs that help children. I want to use whatever time I have left making a difference, not just making shots." Thomas was quiet for a moment. "Your father told me once that the hardest part of being a parent is knowing when to hold on and when to let go. He said Michael would know when basketball had given him everything it could, when it was time to move on to bigger things." He said that in our last conversation, 3 days before he died. He said, "Michael will play as long as he needs to, and then he'll find something more important to do. Because I raised him to understand that basketball is just a game, but life is what matters." Michael felt the words settle into his heart. His father had known. Even facing his own death, James Jordan had been thinking about Michael's future, planning for it, believing in it. "Then that's what I'll do," Michael said. "I'll finish this season strong. I'll try to win one more championship for him. and then I'll retire and focus on the foundation, on being a father, on being the man he raised me to be." "He'd be proud of that decision," Thomas said. They sat together in comfortable silence, two men who had become family through tragedy and loyalty and love. The rest of the season played out like a movie. The Bulls dominated, finishing with the best record in the NBA. They swept through the playoffs. And in June 1998, they faced the Utah Jazz in the finals. Game 6 was in Utah. The Bulls were up 3-2 in the series. Win this game and they'd be champions again. Michael's 6th ring. A perfect ending to his career. With 40 seconds left, the score was tied. Michael brought the ball up the court. The crowd was screaming. His teammates were positioned perfectly. Everything slowed down the way it always did in big moments. Michael looked up into the stands, and there in the upper deck was Thomas Whitmore, wearing his gray jacket, holding his notebook. Watching the way he'd watched for 26 years, Michael smiled. Then he made his move. He drove right, stopped suddenly, and rose up for a jump shot. The defender was close, but Michael had created just enough space. The ball left his hand with perfect rotation. Time seemed to stop. The ball flew through the air, spinning, arcing toward the basket. Michael watched it, knowing. The way you know sometimes, the way champions know. Swish. Bulls win. Championship number 6. The crowd, even though they were Jazz fans, erupted in appreciation for what they'd just witnessed. Michael's teammates mobbed him. Scottie Pippen lifted him in the air. The championship celebration began, but Michael's eyes found Thomas in the upper deck. The old man was standing, tears streaming down his face, notebook pressed against his chest. Michael pointed at him, a gesture that said, "This one's for you, for the promise, for my father, for everything." Thomas understood. He nodded and made one final entry in his notebook. 2 weeks later, Michael held a press conference. The world expected him to talk about the championship, about his legacy, about how it felt to win 6 rings. Instead, he announced his retirement. "I've accomplished everything I set out to accomplish in basketball," Michael said. "Now it's time to focus on what my father taught me was more important: family, community, and leaving the world better than I found it." Reporters shouted questions, but Michael had only one more thing to say. "I want to thank someone special. Thomas Whitmore, can you stand up, please?" In the back of the room, Thomas stood, looking embarrassed by the attention. "This man kept a promise to my father for 26 years, Michael said. "He watched over me, documented my journey, and reminded me what really matters. He's the reason I understand that my greatest championship isn't any of these 6 rings. It's becoming the man my father raised me to be. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for keeping your promise." The room erupted in applause. Thomas wiped his eyes, nodding to Michael across the crowd. 5 years later, in 2003, Michael stood in Springfield, Massachusetts, being inducted into the Basketball Hall of Fame. It was one of the greatest honors in sports, recognition that his career had been historic, legendary, unmatched. He gave his speech, thanking teammates, coaches, opponents, and fans. But he saved his final words for 2 people. "My father, James Jordan, taught me everything that mattered. He taught me to work hard, to respect the game, and to understand that basketball was just basketball. What mattered was who I was off the court. Dad, I hope I made you proud. I hope you're watching from wherever you are, knowing that your son became everything you believed he could be." Michael paused, gathering himself. "And Thomas Whitmore, who's here tonight, thank you for keeping your promise. Thank you for being the link between my father and me. Thank you for reminding me, especially after Dad died, that he was still watching through your eyes. You gave me the greatest gift, my father's final message, and I've tried to live up to it every day since." Thomas stood in the audience, older now, his gray jacket worn but clean, his notebook finally complete. He smiled and nodded, his mission finally, truly finished. 10 years after that, in 2013, Michael sat in his office at the James Jordan Foundation. The foundation had grown beyond anything he'd imagined. Dozens of centers across the country. Thousands of kids helped every year. Millions of dollars in scholarships awarded. But more than the numbers, it was the stories. Kids who'd learned basketball and character. Kids who'd gone to college because of foundation scholarships. Kids who become teachers, doctors, business owners, and parents who passed on the lessons James Jordan had taught his son. Thomas was 90 now, still volunteering at the foundation 3 days a week, still wearing his gray jacket, still taking notes, though now he was documenting the kids' progress instead of Michael's. They sat together, two old friends looking at photos on the wall. Pictures of James Jordan, pictures of Michael playing basketball, pictures of kids at foundation centers across the country. "Do you think we did it?" Michael asked. "Do you think we honored his memory the right way?" Thomas smiled. "Your father didn't want monuments or fame. He wanted his son to be happy and to make a difference. You've done both." "Yes, Michael, we honored him perfectly." Michael looked at a photo of his father, James Jordan in his 30s, young and strong, smiling at the camera. "I miss him every day." "I know," Thomas said, "but he's here, in this foundation, in the lessons you teach, in the way you live your life. That's what immortality really is, not living forever yourself, but living on through the people you've influenced." They sat in comfortable silence, two men at the end of their journey. The shadow in the stands had become a father figure. The man in the gray jacket had become family. The promise had been kept over and over, year after year. "Thank you," Michael said quietly, "for everything, for the promise, for the letter, for being there when I needed someone who understood. Thank you." "Thank you for letting me keep my promise," Thomas replied. "Your father saved my life. You gave my life meaning. I'm the one who should be grateful." Outside the window, kids played basketball on the foundation's courts. Their laughter and shouts echoed through the building. Young voices full of hope and dreams, just like Michael had been at their age. The cycle continued. The legacy grew. And somewhere, somehow, James Jordan smiled. His son had won 6 championships, become the greatest basketball player who ever lived, and built an empire of fame and success. But more importantly, his son had become a good man. And that was worth more than all the championships in the world. The man in the gray jacket closed his notebook for the final time, the promise complete. The shadow in the stands had delivered his message, and Michael Jordan had heard it, lived it, and passed it on. That was the real victory. That was the true greatness. That was everything James Jordan had ever wanted, and it was perfect. So that's the incredible story of Michael Jordan, his father James, and Thomas Whitmore, the man in the gray jacket who kept a promise for over 25 years. A story that reminds us that real greatness isn't measured in championships, but in the kindness we show and the promises we keep. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching this video from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. We love hearing from our viewers all around the world. If this story touched your heart, please hit that like button. It helps us spread these powerful messages of kindness and loyalty to more people who need to hear them. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another inspiring story. Together, we can create a community that values character over fame and kindness over success. There's another amazing story waiting for you right now. Click on the video appearing on your screen to keep the inspiration going. Thank you for watching, and remember, keep your promises, spread kindness, and be great not just at what you do, but at who you are. See you in the next video.